Welcome to episode 158 of the Grip Strip Podcast, F1 and IndyCar time edition of the Grip Strip Podcast. My name is Philip Matthew. I'm your host, and as always, I'm with my co-host, the former iRacing Indy 500 champion, a computer genius, a gentleman, and a scholar, somebody who might be at St. Pete this weekend. His name is Josh Fine. What's going on, man?
And doing great, Phil. And as always, glad to be back on for another week of the show. Of course, we had Cup and Xfinity this past weekend at Fontana, which I somehow got my picks right with Kyle Busch and John Hunter Nemechek both winning, and should have bet on it, I guess. But I'm not really um, caring that I didn't, so it's fine. But it would have been nice to make that little bit of dough on that. But regardless, it's always fun to make those picks. But yeah, we got IndyCar and Formula One coming up, and I may or may not be at St. Pete. Haven't decided yet if I'm gonna go, but probably make that decision later in the week. Not sure yet what my plans are gonna be this weekend. But yeah, of course, glad to be back on the show and yeah, ready to get into it.
Yeah, we're going to have a busy show this week going through the Cup and Xfinity, as Josh mentioned, where Kyle Busch won in his third start for Richard Childress Racing in the Cup side, and then John Hunter Nemechek wins his third career Xfinity race, second, I think, for Gibbs. So, and solidifies himself in the playoffs very early on. So, we'll get into the points. We'll get into what both races were, which wasn't a whole hell of a lot of anything, but and what the thoughts are now that there's a likely at least a year or so, maybe year and a half before they reopen. If they reopen, they've sold a lot of the land within the racetrack and then around the racetrack. So, what will we see? Is this finally the end of Southern SoCal for NASCAR? Um, because it's been a stop-start kind of thing over the years anyway. We will preview both the IndyCar Series and the Formula One World Championship uh, this year. There's different topics, of course, a lot to dive into with both series. The roundup will include the Formula E race at Cape Town, the Phillip Island World Superbikes, brief previews of F2, F3, which will also be at Bahrain this coming weekend, and Indy NXT, Indy Lights at St. Petersburg. Then Josh and I will go and we'll preview and make picks for Las Vegas. Definitely, I would go and listen to Josh's picks more than mine because I'm generally wrong. Um, Josh will tell us all things going on in iRacing and in the world of gaming in his sim segment, and then we'll close the deal. So let's go with the Cup Series first, the Pala Casino 400 at Auto Club Fontana, California Speedway, and one Kyle Busch started 21st in the race due to the algorithm and finished second in the second stage, led the last 20 laps of the race to earn his first win for Richard Childress Racing and only his third start. Second start it's only second points race, but third official start for RCR. He's been in position to win the other two races too, so it's not really all that shocking. William Clyde Elliott II finished second. Ross Chastain, after starting third, Ross Chastain won both stages yesterday, led the most laps, 91. Him and his teammate Daniel Suarez finished third and fourth, respectively. Kevin Harvick in his last race at California Speedway finished fifth. Denny Hamlin, sixth. Brad Keselowski, Alex Bowman, a former winner at California, eighth. Austin Dillon, ninth. And Joey Logano, defending series champion, finished 10th. Martin Truex finished 11th, and he got stage points. Corey LaJoie had a pretty good day. He was up there for most of the day, ran into a couple people, got stage points, finished 14th. Will Byron had stage points in stage one, but had issues later in the day, finished 25th, and Ryan Blaney was second in stage 1. But I think both of them are involved in that big wreck later in the race. Trying to check, the 12 was, not the 24. So I don't know what happened to Will Byron. That was around halfway, just before halfway there for Blaney. That took him out, and then some of these other guys that are behind him had some major issues, including my pick, Kyle Larson, the defending race winner, had serious engine electrical problems, and they basically replaced every module they could on that damn thing and sent it back out, and it ran. Chase Briscoe's car wasn't running properly for about half the race, and then they finally got that fixed, and he got up to 20th. So there was a bunch of different problems that went on there. But the first thing to look at is Kyle Busch, Josh. And I mean, everybody knew he was going to be motivated. Everybody knew that he had something to prove. He has a chip on his shoulder. It's not like he hasn't had one anyways his whole entire effing career. But now going to RCR, taking over a team that won 3 races last year with Tyler Reddick. They're the same team, same spotter, all that. The only thing that changed is they got arguably one of the greatest drivers in NASCAR history coming into a program and into a team that has been on the back foot for many years. Reddick was kind of like the first piece of actually getting them back to relevancy. But now, since Harvick, but now they have that guy. And Kyle Busch winning this early in the season, I said it a couple weeks ago, I might have said it last week for the 500, that it has all the makings of 2008 to me when he went to Gibbs. He won in his fourth start at Gibbs at Atlanta, with counting the shootout or clash or whatever the hell it was called at that point, and then was running up front in other races prior to that, and he went on to win 8 races that year. But I don't know what he's going to do this year, but to go out there, beat the best car, which was Ross Chastain for a good amount of the day, good pit stops by the A crew, which was not surprising, and to get that lead and hold it for the last 20 laps of that race, holding off Elliott, is pretty big for Kyle Busch, pretty big for RCR, and I would say it's a pretty ominous sign for a lot of this field, Josh, in terms of what may come from that. What do you think about the race yesterday and Kyle Busch coming through with that victory?
I mean, it's not really surprising, considering what Kyle Busch, has been motivated to do this whole off season, and considering finished well in the Clash, got second there, was in position to win the Daytona 500, and now the floodgate is open now with a victory here at Fontana, where he won his first career race and now wins the last career race, or the last official race on the big track there, which I'll bring up in a minute, but got it done. The number 8 car, last year, of course, dominated this race until Tyler Reddick fell out the race, and then this year they basically brought back the same car, and I think they probably had a lot of help with the rain and the weather taking over during the weekend, canceling all practice and qualifying, because I think probably if that had happened, maybe teams could have done a little bit of work and adjustments, and maybe caught up to the 8 car in terms of speed. But on Sunday, I mean, from the drop of the green flag, the number 8 Kyle Busch was really fast from the get-go, and they overcame a penalty in the middle of it too. So they were able to get back into the top 5, and they battled Ross Chastain throughout most of the 3/4 of that race, and they were the only 2 drivers that could really get away from the field. And then at the end of the day, Kyle Busch, after the final couple of pit stops, was able to get back into the lead and blow him out of the water there. So at least this week, he didn't have to deal with any late cautions, which has happened a couple of times in the past at ACS, but definitely a thoroughly dominating win for him, and starts off the year on a good note. And I don't know how many wins he'll get this year, but I can probably see at least another 3 wins, so at least 4 wins overall for him to start off the year. So yeah, great start off, as said for Kyle Busch. And interestingly enough, I was listening to Hamlin's podcast earlier, and they were talking about the engines, and apparently RCR has the best engines now, which is really interesting because I think for many years on the big tracks, on the 2 mile, 2.5 miles, it's always been Hendrick Motorsports. I think that's always had kind of the best in terms of horsepower, and it seems like maybe the tides have shifted, and RCR is now the best in that department. So we'll have to see how that holds up throughout the rest of the year. But I thought that was an interesting footnote there. But yeah, I think the rest of the field, I think Ross Chastain, he was also there throughout the race, and I think they're going to continue off from where they were in 2022. So expect to see him probably get a win here pretty soon. If not, in the next race, we'll see. But I think they did pretty well as well. Hamlin was up there, and I think Alex Bowman had a good run as well. Chase Elliott, of course, finished second and ended up coming out through a small run towards the end, was able to get up towards the front, get past Ross Chastain. So yeah, Hendrick, Trackhouse, and Gibbs, they all had pretty good runs overall for their team. And then I think Childress overall, they got Kyle Busch, of course, winning the race. But then I think on the flip side of it, you have to wonder how much longer for somebody like Austin Dillon, how much longer they're going to say, I'm happy for my teammate, until he starts to not feel happy about the success, even though he finished ninth. But, eventually he's going to, start to wonder about, when can he win more races than what he usually does. So, that's going to be interesting. And then another fact to Kyle Busch winning the race here, it's the first time since Dale Earnhardt that a former Cup champion has won a race for Richard Childress Racing. Of course, we had Kevin Harvick, who's Cup champion now, but he wasn't a Cup champion when he drove for Childress, the most successful driver, I think, in that team in that period since Earnhardt until now. So that's a interesting nugget there. So yeah, of course, Kyle Busch, getting out, winning this race, and I definitely see him winning a bunch more races later on this year.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that that's a very accurate call, Josh. I mean, with this the Gen 7 car, there's a lot more parity. So maybe some of these teams can just stay with them. I mean, obviously, Trackhouse is there still, Hendrick, Gibbs, Stuart Haas, at least with Kevin Harvick, Penske. So, I mean, there are a lot of teams up there. And so there's a lot of opportunity. I mean, Brad Keselowski ends up getting a top 10 finish. Last year, he struggled for a good part of the season, and on maybe late in the year, last quarter of the year was where it started to turn around for the 6 car. The 17 car was better generally across the majority of the year, and then they, of course, got that win. I mean, Chastain winning both stages, not surprising. He did well there last year. Josh brought up, of course, with Kyle Busch driving the car that Reddick was driving last year. They led the most laps, I think, last year as well. Logano trying to win at one of Roger Penske's old tracks. There, Bowman trying to win again at California. Hamlin, Blaney getting involved in that restart incident on lap 88. That basically cost him any chance. He was looking good earlier in the day. So in terms of and Tyler Reddick was taken out in that wreck, so he was done early. The 2311 team had a brutal day. I mean, Reddick gets involved in that wreck. Bubba Wallace has an engine issue, and so those two guys really got screwed over. You had some other issues for some of these other guys. I mean, Penske outside of Logano had a rough day. SHR outside of Kevin Harvick, it was pretty brutal. Ryan Preece got involved in a wreck, or involved in that same restart wreck. And then along with Eric Almirola, And then I mentioned Briscoe having engine problems for a good part of the day, and took a while for them to fix it. So that's something to look at. We'll see what comes of that. I mean, early in the season, giving up a lot of points, it's not great. It puts more emphasis on them, of course, going and winning, uh, because that's the way to kind of fix the issue with the points in general. So we'll get into those points. Right now, the current point standings has Ross Chastain overall points leader over Joey Logano by a point, Alex Bowman third, Kevin Harvick fourth, Daniel Suarez fifth, Chris Buescher in sixth. Richard and Kyle Busch are seventh and eighth in points, and they're both, of course, the two winners so far this year. Hamlin and Keselowski round out the top 10. The bump spot at the moment is Michael McDowell, 2 points ahead of Keebler and Gumby, and then 5 points ahead of AJ Allmendinger, Harrison Burton, Todd Gilliland, who at this point does not have a full season ride. I mean, even Cody Ware's in it at the moment. So people that are on the back foot at the moment, Tyler Reddick has 4 points just through 2 races. Even Ty Dillon, who blew up at Daytona 30 laps into the race, has more points. Reese, Briscoe, Eric Jones, Justin Haley, William Byron. I would venture to say anybody that's, I mean, Larson's in 24th right now, early in the season with his mechanical problems from yesterday. A bunch of the also three of the four SHR cars are up against it early in the season. So that's something to look at as they go to Las Vegas this coming weekend. If some of these teams can kind of turn it around, put something together. Uh, we'll get into the Xfinity Production Alliance Group 300, the last official race on the big oval at Fontana, and saw John Hunter Nemechek take the victory. He did well in the second stage, finished second in stage two, got stage points in both stages, led 6 times for 49 laps, and gets his first win of the year, locks himself into the playoffs. Sam Mayer, Justin Allgaier, Chandler Smith, Josh Berry, after a wild day for Josh Berry, gets a top 5 finish. Austin Hill follows up his Daytona win with a top 10 finish. In sixth, Riley Herbst, Austin Dillon, who had a part in affecting the official result, finished eighth. Brett Moffitt, ninth, and Parker Kligerman finished 10th. Daniel Hemrick, who's basically on one knee, his right knee, he got some sort of issue, injury from working out, finished 12th. The person sandwiched in between those two was frickin' Joe Graff Jr. I guess the MFer can drive somewhat. Uh, Trying to see who else. Sammy Smith finished third in stage two, but finished 19th in the race. Sheldon Creed had stage points, was up front, but then got spun off. I forget who spun him out. And Cole Custer, who was involved in an incident with the for Austin Dillon and and Joe Graff Jr. After leading the good majority of the first part of the race, won both stages, but ends up finishing 27th. I mean, you ended up making this pick as well, Josh, with John Hunter Nemechek. It's a it's a track where Gibbs has had great success, of course, over the years. Harrison Burton won his first career race there. Kyle Busch has won there a bunch of times. Tony Stewart won in a Joe Gibbs Toyota in the Xfinity series there back in 2008. So it kind of just goes across the board. But John Hunter Nemechek going and getting that victory and getting it out of the way early in the season is a positive sign. It kind of seems like a couple of years ago in the trucks where he's coming in and he's trophy hunting. Well, I think he's going to have an opportunity to get a lot of trophies. Now, the one thing he didn't do in the truck series that year was close the deal. Can he close the deal this year? We're early in the season, but he's given himself a chance to start preparing for that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Well, I mean, to explain my pick here first, I mean, I think I just really looked at the history of Joe Gibbs Racing at this racetrack, and honestly, I thought John Hunter Nemechek won in the Truck Series at this racetrack, but they haven't raced at Fontana in a long time in the Truck Series, so that one's out the window. But I mean, he seemed pretty good at the bigger tracks in the Truck Series as well, so maybe there's the thinking there. But yeah, I mean, he came out and did pretty good at this race, and obviously he won, and now only his third career victory in the Xfinity Series and qualified for the playoffs. So first time ever in his career, he qualified for the playoffs this early. But you know, he definitely was pretty dominant in this race, and yeah, I think it shows what he can do in good equipment and really good equipment, of course, with Joe Gibbs Racing. But you know, he definitely was able to get out in front, and you know, he battled Sam Mayer at the end, and I think he just had a little bit better handle and clean air at the end. I think Sam could have gotten there if he tried a little bit different line, but you know, he basically both of them followed the same type of line the last 10, 15 laps of the race, and Mayer wasn't really able to ever close with greater than or less than half a second. So John Hunter is able to basically go out and get out and get the win. But interesting fact is, he wins the last official race on the 2 mile configuration, and his dad Joe Nemechek goes out and won the pole at the first ever Auto Club 500 or California 500 back in 1997. So interesting footnote there, and I think John Hunter Nemechek was only a couple weeks old when that happened. So interesting, how that all works out, and John Hunter, I think, is going to be a successful driver here in the Xfinity Series, and possibly could have a Cup ride in line for him with either 2311 or Gibbs if a seat opens up or something like that. But yeah, I mean, this race is pretty wild. Maybe I don't say wild, but I mean, in terms of cautions, I mean, there was 10 cautions, and I mean, you saw a bunch of cautions. Justin Allgaier got into it, yeah, he didn't get into it, but he fell lap down, got his lap back, and then got stage points. Josh Berry spun out. You saw Sheldon Creed have a wild save that should have been a crash, and everything. Brandon Jones spun out as well. And you had Cole Custer, of course, get into it, who I think probably could have won this race if it weren't for that incident. Led 46 laps. I think he was up there with John Hunter, but after that, issue, didn't have the same result after that, even though he was a lap down. So yeah, definitely unfortunate for Cole Custer, early bid for the title. After being in Cup for a few years and everything, and then of course we had a last caution with 12 laps to go, which kind of interrupted the final green flag run. Well, of course we had the 43 spin out too, so that was kind of interrupted final pit stops and the strategy and everything. And Austin Dillon was out front for a bit, then 43 spins out with 20 laps to go, and then Sammy Smith, Austin Hill, Sheldon Creed accident on the backstretch and everything on that ensuing restart. So yeah, definitely a bit of a lot more incidents, I think, than in the Cup Series. But I think both those races really came down to who had the best car at the end of the day. And I think John Hunter Nemechek definitely had best car at the end of the day in that race. But yeah, I mean, it's on the topic of Fontana, last race ever in the 2 mile configuration. Certainly unfortunate. And I mean, kind of a segue into that real quick, but unfortunate it's last race, and Of course, I mean, there was a lot of money involved in the land sale, like $500,000 or $500 million. So, of course, they were going to take the money and everything. But we'll see what happens if they even build the short track. There's a lot of regulations, it seems like there's at the local level, the local government in that area. So, see if they even are even able to build it if NASCAR wants to stay committed to that area. But yeah, unfortunate that's the last two races on the big oval, one of the best tracks I think in NASCAR, in my opinion, kind of similar to Homestead, but it is what it is. So we'll see how they go from there. But yeah, I think it was two great events to go out with in this race. So yeah, that's my thought on the whole weekend, I guess, with California and with the two races that we had there this weekend.
Yeah, and having all the crazy weather we've had in recent days, and there was snow in LA on Saturday, snow, rain, and I don't know how many other different things, and that canceled all the activities on Saturday. They were able to get everything in on Sunday. It was kind of a dull, dreary day, but the track there was a lot more grip, so it really didn't allow as much multi groove racing outside of the first couple of laps after restart. But in the grand scheme of things, it was a good track. There were good races in its later years. Initially, it probably wasn't the greatest racetrack. It was definitely an IndyCar track more than a NASCAR track. In recent years, I think with the Gen 6 and now the Gen 7 car, I think it became a little better. The Xfinity cars being a little racier with more horsepower and less downforce probably played a role in that as well. If they had been able to run in the day, it might have been a little better. But unfortunate, we'll see what happens. It's going to take a while for them to reconfigure this track if it happens. If not, it doesn't sound like there's much of a commitment to the likes of an Irwindale or a Kern County Speedway or something like that, uh, unless one of these entities, whether it is NASCAR themselves or SMI, come in to try to help or work with them. So that's it's an unfortunate loss, but then it's kind of plays. It's kind of what LA is. They do have two NFL teams, but they don't barely draw for either of them. Their basketball teams or whatever, and I mean the fans generally in that area. I mean, I my former co-host Adam was there when we did whatever we did NASCast and what's it called Speed Week. He was there, but and they said it was a sellout, and I'm thinking, well, if though they had those sellouts back in the day, maybe we're not in this situation either, in terms of having to go and basically destroy the track. They had a good thing with IndyCar as well, but their dates never really seemed to fit. So that also kind of blew up, even though their last IndyCar race they had there was probably one of the craziest, coolest races they ever had, um, with Graham Rehal winning it. Speaking of Graham Rehal and other people, we'll now transition into the IndyCar series and the uh, the preview for that. It's gonna it's an interesting year for sure. Uh, 27 full time cars in the IndyCar series, and so there's a lot of stuff going on with that. Now they have made other changes. You have renewable shell fuel uh for the cars, for all the cars, so that's a new change. Or working on some other aspects of the car. They're going to be doing a hybrid um aspect to it next year. So even though it's the same chassis, which is pretty weak, but it is what it is. I'm trying to go through here. Yeah, you got the advanced auto parts checkered flag now. So something go through here. Uh, get into the drivers. I mean, last year, of course, we saw Will Power win. his second championship, and was really steady through the whole entire year. And it he had and Joseph Newgarden was his closest competitor. Penske was dominant for sure. Scotty McLaughlin had a great year in his second season in the IndyCar series. So there's definitely there was a lot that took place there. A lot of wins for the Penske organization. Scott Dixon got in there trying to win his seventh championship. And Alex Palou won the last race of the year, but otherwise had kind of a interesting title defense. Marcus Ericsson won Indy, which basically was why he was in that mix there. All these players are back. Alex Palou, we don't know where he's going to be next year. I kind of figure he's going to McLaren, but Dixon is still Scott Dixon. Will Power is still and he's got Verizon back, and they don't seem to want to leave. So he's going to be around as long as he wants to. And Newgarden, of course, trying to get that third championship, trying to get Indy on his mantle, along with Scotty McLaughlin, of course, both of them. The Bus Bros, definitely. One of them wants to win this Indy 500 for Roger Penske at his house, literally now. I guess we'll go from there first. We'll talk about Penske first, Josh. They dominated last year. Will Power had a great year on his way to the championship. He only won once, but had a 5.9 average finish, and he had a 7.6 average start, which is literally only, what is it? It was the fourth best starting average. So when you're up front every race basically, and you're consistently scoring points, it's very hard to beat you, especially in a full season championship. And Will Power hasn't generally been known to be that kind of guy, but he showed that change last year. Does this new year kind of fit the same way? Are we looking at a repeat for him? Does Joseph Newgarden come around after the last few years finishing second and get over the hump? Or can Scotty McLaughlin go out there and win his first IndyCar championship in 2023?
I mean, it's pretty tough to say because I think they're all three of them are really good. But I think if I had to pick, I had to pick between Will Power and Joseph Newgarden out of those three to be the best, out of the organization. And I think, for Will Power, I think he's had a change of perspective in the last couple of years, and I think last year you kind of saw a change in his mindset throughout the year, and he became a lot more consistent, like you said, and didn't have as many of the blow ups or the meltdowns like he had in previous years, and managed to stay the course throughout the entire season. And even though he won one race, of course, won the championship, Joseph Newgarden was right there with him for most of the year, but just didn't have enough points at the end of the day. And I think Newgarden, with the amount of wins that he had last year, he had 5 wins, which definitely should have been up there to win the potentially win the title. And that's a opportunity that you want to make the most out of. And I think going into this season, I think he's gonna be a little bit more hungrier to try to go out and win the title for Team Penske and get another title. I think he's definitely the guy that will challenge Will Power. It's just going to come down to being able to win at multiple tracks. I think it's going to be a tough schedule, and especially with you have some changes at other organizations that I think are going to be more competitive. It's definitely going to be a challenge for him this year. But I think based on what he did last year, I think he can easily go up against Will Power. I think really it's just going to come down to being able to get points at the Indianapolis. Last year I think that was his worst race overall in the year, the Indianapolis Grand Prix, and then the Indy 500. I think those two tracks, if you can have a good month of May, and then also not have any DNFs. We saw how much the crash that he had at Iowa in the second race, how much that affected him. Of course, he won the first race at Iowa the previous day, and then on the second day was leading and crashed in that race. So if he doesn't have that happen, I think if he stays mistake free and doesn't have any DNFs, I think we could easily see Joseph Newgarden be a three-time IndyCar champion at the end of the year over his, or at least be better in points overall than his teammate Will Power.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be definitely those three guys are going to be up there from this week at St. Petersburg. All three have won there. McLaughlin's a defending race winner. Newgarden's won there a couple of years ago. Powers won there before. So that'll be something to look at for sure. But Penske, of course, when you talk about IndyCar racing, it's Penske versus Ganassi. And I did mention Scott Dixon, the six-time IndyCar champion. He went and passed Mario Andretti for total wins last year, which is pretty epic. And now, I mean, he's trying for that seventh championship. He let a likely Indy 500 win go by a rare mistake, and he's been qualifying on pole for the Indy 500 the last few years. He's just not been able to close that, which is weird considering how great Scott Dixon is. Uh, Ganassi has put a good emphasis on Indy in recent years, and that's shown, especially in qualifying. But Dixon, 2 out of the last 3 years, he's had a chance to win the Indy 500. He got passed late by Takuma Sato in 2020, and then last year. So, but he also wants to keep on winning races, and he wants to win another championship. Alex Palou is kind of in limbo this year. There's been sponsorship changes. NTT Data left the team. They've moved over to McLaren, uh, which we'll talk about in a minute. But he's back after winning the last race in dominant fashion. Then you have Marcus Ericsson, the defending Indy 500 winner, trying to compete for a championship here. Finished sixth last year in the championship, as I mentioned. The year before, he finished sixth in the championship as well. So he's pretty consistent that way, and he has been winning for this team, even though the sponsor he has doesn't exist here in the United States. And then they have a fourth car, which was the Jimmy Johnson car the last couple of years, but now is going to be number 11. That'll be driven by Formula 2 driver for the last few years, Marcus Armstrong, for the majority of the season. And then on the ovals, it will be Takuma Sato, who's, of course, trying to go for a third Indy 500 win amongst however many ovals there are this year. I think two. They have the Iowa doubleheader, you have Gateway and Texas. So that's five. Yeah. So he's on the same kind of plan as Ed Carpenter, and Takuma Sato's reduced his commitment, at least for now, to the ovals, and he will have a great chance to possibly add a third Indy 500 win to his mantle for a third different team, nonetheless, because he won for Andretti and Rahal his first two wins. So that would be something for the stats. Now, looking at Ganassi, Josh, I mean they were definitely behind the Penske team in general, but you look at the points, they were the closest running group there. They were third, fifth, and sixth. So Ganassi, of course, he likes winners, and Scott Dixon has been his most prolific winner, I think, in the history of his organization. He doesn't seem to age. Does What does he have to do this year? I mean, I kind of have an idea of what he really needs to change or adjust so that he can get through and get that seven championship a little easier. What are you looking at for Scott Dixon? And does Alex Palou, whatever his contract situation is for 2024, come back and have a season more like his championship winning year in 2021? Uh, And does Marcus Ericsson have a chance? Is this his time? Can he finally win a championship after however many years he's been? I think 3-4 years in the IndyCar series.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can take that one. I think starting off with Scott Dixon. I mean, we've seen what he can do over the years, and he's always been consistent throughout, you know, his time in the IndyCar series, and he's always stayed cool under pressure. That's why they call him the Iceman. But I think he's just gotta. He's just always had the last, last year at least. If he doesn't speed at the Indy 500, he probably has a better chance at winning the title. So I mean, it's like what I said for Joseph Newgarden. It just really comes down to being consistent throughout the entire season. There's always going to be one race when you look back when you don't win the title. There's always going to be one or two races that you look at that, oh, if we had finished in that race better, or if we had not crashed or whatever, we would have won the championship. And I think, last year, like you said, all along the past, several months, if he had not made that speeding penalty, he probably wins the Indy 500 and probably propels him to IndyCar championship. And I think just really have to, be consistent throughout the entire year and just have a lot of good pace. And I think it would help to also be able to have good qualifying pace throughout the year. They've been good on ovals, I think, but I think they also need a little bit more pace on the road courses, and I think that's kind of where Penske seems to have them beat overall as a team. For I think maybe even Honda overall, but I think at least Ganassi, that's I think that maybe where they need to improve to be able to compete against Penske. But I think the rest of the guys for Ganassi, I think with Alex Palou, yeah, he's in a bit of a limbo right now because he's not going to be driving for them much longer. He'll be at McLaren in 2024, and definitely it's kind of a interesting year where he's kind of the sitting duck in that organization, kind of just there because they couldn't get settled on a deal within everything with McLaren, and now he's kind of just driving that car. Of course, now has a interesting sponsorship situation as well. So I think for Palou, as long as he doesn't have any controversies, I think it would probably be a good year for him in terms of that. But I think I would not be surprised if he like late in the season has a lot of struggles, and it becomes pretty evident that he's pretty much given up, or I wouldn't say him giving up, but there's pretty obvious that they don't really have much to race for in later on the year if they're out of the title contention. But he's still proven himself before as an IndyCar champion, so we'll see if he's able to perform better on some of these tracks that he didn't perform as good as last year. Can he improve at the Indy 500? Can he be better on oval racing, and balance out with some of what he's been able to do on road and street courses throughout the start of his career? So that's kind of what I look at for Alex Palou. I mean, it's kind of an interesting situation there. I think Marcus Ericsson, of course, with him already winning the Indy 500 last year, could he repeat again? It's certainly possible, but I think overall he's kind of had, even though if you look at from when he won in 21 at Nashville, going all the way to I think the 2022 Indy 500, he was one of the best in terms of points scored for that organization. But I think throughout the rest of the year, I think you noticed, or at least I noticed, a little bit of a fall off after the Indy 500 in terms of consistency, and had a couple of races where they weren't really competitive. Of course, Nashville last year, they weren't really competitive. That was his worst race after winning the Indy 500, and didn't have seemed like he was more towards the back half of the top 10, in terms of his finishes in this series. And of course, had the early season issue at Long Beach and didn't finish the race there. So I think that's also one that you have to look at in terms of his year last year. And I think if they can improve in terms of finishing more races closer to the podium rather than kind of being towards the back half of the top 10. Like they were for a lot of the second half of the year. That's something that they've got to improve on. So I think out of all those three guys, Polo, Dixon, and Marcus Ericsson, they're full time for the entire year. I think he's got a lot to improve on, even as an Indy 500 winner. But he doesn't have a title, like the rest of his two teammates there. And then, of course, with his other two teammates and Marcus Armstrong, Takuma Sato. I mean, we've heard a lot about him. Marcus Armstrong just being really good on the road course races, and he's definitely somebody that could be competitive in that car in 2023. So I mean, look out for him to be up, someone that could compete for top tens and maybe sneak a podium or two in there throughout the rest of the year. So we'll see there. And then of course Sato. I mean, it's pretty clear he's very much on the back end of his career. And now is only competing on ovals, so we'll see. What he's able to do in terms of being able to compete at the Indy 500. If he can go for another victory in this race, it'd be his third one, which would be a pretty elite list, and then he'd have another shot to be a four-time winner like Elio did a couple years ago. So we'll see if he's able to compete at the Indy 500 this year, and then if he can do things at at Texas and Iowa, and then later on at Gateway. He's one of the best in terms of racecraft, I think, in the IndyCar series when it comes to oval racing, and we've seen what he's able to do. Early on he was more of a bonsai move guy, and now kind of a he knows how to get things done at the end of the race. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But I think Ganassi, if they can improve on their consistency throughout the year, I think they'll have a shot at the title versus Penske.
Yeah, I mean it's really with the Ganassi team, it's a lot about what Dixon can do. Um, I agree with the fact that being a lame duck, it's going to be hard for Pelot to really go and do anything. Um, so it might destabilize the team in a sense. Now they're trying to figure out, who is going to drive that car in 24. They've been testing guys. You have Armstrong in the fold. They have other F2 guys they've been looking at. Uh, they also tested Nick Cassidy, the former Super Formula champion. That's where they got Alex Palou. Well, I mean, he drove for Coyne and then moved to Ganassi, but that's where he came from. So that would be a good move, I would think, for Ganassi if they went with somebody like a Nick Cassidy to come into IndyCar. But I mean, what do we really see there? I think outside of Dixon, Marcus Ericsson is not really, he's had his moments, but it's not been every race. And in this championship, you need to be up there every race. Power showed that last year. DNFs are really bad. And that's essentially what did Joseph Newgarden in the mistake, of course, for Dixon at Indy when you had double points last year. That won't be the case this year. Played a big part in his situation for the championship as well. I'm curious what that fourth car will be like, how Armstrong will assimilate into IndyCar after uh, being F2 for a while, not being able to make it to Formula One, how he'll do there. And Takuma Sato, I think, will be a force at every race that he shows up to because that's just who he is. It's Takuma Sato. So we move on from Penske and Ganassi, and then I guess we go to the next best team, which is the McLaren team, because the drivers that finished seventh, eighth, and ninth in points are all McLaren drivers now. That's Pato Award, Alexander Rossi, the new hire, and Felix Rosenquist. Both are Pato Award and Rosenquist finishing the top five of the Indianapolis 500. Award won two races last year. And Rossi finally got back on the top step of the podium last year in his final year for Andretti. Consistency, I mean, qualifying Pato is great in that, but he was giving up in certain areas. And right now, I mean, they're that next team. You think about Penske, you think about Ganassi. For a long time, Andretti used to be that third team. Now, honestly, with all the commitments and all the money and all the energy that's being put into this effort, three-car organization, basically the Chevy, the secondary Chevy team with McLaren, they've also committed to Kyle Larson for 2 years at the Indianapolis 500 starting in 24. He'll be testing for them at some point this year. Then he'll be running Indy for 2 years at the McLaren team. Uh, that seat, the fourth seat at McLaren, will be held at Indy by one Antoine Canan, who is announcing his retirement. Now, I don't buy it really. I mean, he's like one of them. It's kind of got that Brett Favre, Aaron kind of feel to it, where he's going to retire, but he's going to come back deal. And when you're as good as he is at Indy and you're getting good rides, you finished on the podium last year. Why would you quit? Um, yeah, he was reminiscing about California because he won his Indy Lights championship back in 1997, I believe, and then he won his last IndyCar race in the 10 car at ACS. I think it was 2015. So, uh, for in terms of the McLaren team, I I would focus more on Award, not just because he's my favorite driver, but the fact is he's the guy. He's been the guy for that organization. They put all their energy to him. Now, third full year with this team, or fourth full year, I think maybe. I have to just give me a second here. I'll go through that. I mean, it's his third full year or fourth full year, starting his fourth full year with the organization. Um, and that's he's won last two races each of the last 2 years. Um, in 2021, it was good enough for him. His performance was good enough for him to finish third in points. Last year, he uh, he fell out of or he was running out of finish of 14, 17 races, so he fell out of three and only would finish on a lead lap of 12 of them. That's probably part of the reason why it didn't work out so well. But if there is somebody I think is that person that could go out there and get into that Penske and Ganassi battle, I think Patricio Award is that guy. And it's not personal bias, it's just a reality. He has that ability. He has the killer instinct. He wants it bad enough. Zach Brown has him in that flagship car for a reason. Um, you would think IndyCar would have the foresight to go and run in Mexico since he is Mexican descent and he grew up in Texas, but then they race at that that garbage oval. Instead of destroying ACS, they should destroy Texas and bury it into the 200 feet into the ground. Um, but is it Patos? I think personally, to me, I think if there's anybody that could really contend outside of Scott Dixon and those Penske guys, I think the next best driver right now would be Pato Award, Josh. And I also believe that the motivation that Alexander Rossi has to kind of prove he still has it and going into a new organization, a fresh start, maybe somewhat of a Formula One feel, which he comes from the European Formula racing. I mean, Logan Sargent, which we'll mention here in a little bit, is the first American driver since Alexander Rossi. So, and of course, Rosenquist has been around, and I think he's the one that's on the hot seat again, knowing that Palou is likely going to move over there. So, what are your thoughts on the McLaren team for 2023, Josh? And especially the prospects for Pato O'Ward to take that next step in his career and get that championship the way he's been able to win championships in the Road to Indy program prior.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a interesting year for McLaren. I think they have a better shot this year of winning an IndyCar title than they do a Formula One title, but that's just me. I think Pato O'Ward, yeah, he's definitely shown what he can do over the last couple of years. They were a little bit off last year at the beginning of the season, but then, they corrected a little bit, although they still finished a little bit low in points. They collected 2 wins. They won at Birmingham or at Barber Motorsports Park at the beginning of the year, and then were the benefits of Joseph Newgarden crashing out at Iowa. So he's definitely somebody I think that can definitely contend, and we saw what they were able to do at 2021 when they finished in second in the championship or third place in the championship, and he's definitely got a lot of talent behind the wheel. And I think he's definitely someone who showed what they can do in IndyCar and compete against Penske and Ganassi. And I think really it's just going to come down to reliability issues and how many times last year did they have issues. They had issues at Mid Ohio where he should have probably won that race. Being honest, led 28 laps, was on the pole, and then had an issue with the fueling system. Or Road America had an issue with the engine with a couple, with less than 10 laps to go in that race. Had an issue or crashed out at Nashville last year. So I think he has a lot to improve on in terms of consistency there, but the pace and I think the desire to win's all right there. So I think if they just give him a good car this year, and I mean they mostly had a good car, but just had a couple of issues, and it's hard to compete for a championship in a series that's really competitive and hard to win when you have double DNFs back to back, with like they had at Road America and Mid Ohio. So looking at that, I mean, you gotta be able to not have those issues and come out and win the championship for Pato Awards. So they have the ability. I think they just need just a little bit more, and of course finish second in the Indy 500. So I definitely think McLaren is right there with Ganassi in terms of pace at the Indy 500, and I think they definitely have a shot to win that race. If they have just enough speed to be able to pass in the final lap in turn one, I think they'll be able to do it. So Pato O'Ward, of course, definitely look at him as the number one challenger to anybody in Penske and Ganassi this year, in terms of points, in terms of pace and race victories. I think he's the guy. And then as far as Rossi, this is kind of him resurrecting his career in a way. I mean, had a couple of bad years at Andretti. Started off pretty good with him at Andretti, of course, winning the Indy 500 in 2016, the 100th running there, and 2017, 2018, part of 2019, he was right there, but then kind of fell off in 2020, and then 21 and 22, he wasn't there. And for Rossi, even though he won last year, wasn't all that great until kind of the end of the year. And so look for Rossi to try to prove himself again that he can be a top driver in this series and compete for podiums and race wins. So we know what he can do behind a race car. It's just a matter of him having the right chemistry and the team being able to field him a good car on a week-to-week basis, unlike what he had at Andretti. And I think he also probably at the end of his time at Andretti probably had issues with teammates, of course, Colton Herta and Rowan Grosjean, of course. But now he's got two new guys, and he's also the older guy, so he has two guys that are younger him that he can lead and give mentorship and advice. So there's also that part, and I think that'll help him improve his game. So I mean I look for him to also challenge, but I still being the new guy, maybe he may not have as much results as a word, but he's definitely still be up there, I think. And then with Felix Rosenquist, I mean, not too high on him really. I think he's won before, but I think he's just kind of there, relevant to in relevance to Rossi and Award, but definitely he can compete for wins in the right opportunity. But it just seems like those opportunities aren't as often as what you'd expect for somebody that is driving for a top organization. And remember, in 2022 with the mix up with McLaren and Ganassi with Pilot, well, they're looking at, well, where would he go and fill in a seat there? Well, either they have a fourth car next year in 24 for Pilot, or they bump Rosenquist to Formula E or something like I think they were gonna do until they couldn't settle with Pilot until 24. So ultimately, I think Rosenquist, even though he signed, re-signed for IndyCar this year, I think at some point he might get booted from that seat, and they'll keep him in house and potentially send him to something like Formula E or wherever. But as long as he doesn't like completely be terrible, I think he'll be okay this year, and maybe he can still get a top 10 points finish. But I just don't see him being that competitive in comparison to his teammates. So it's gonna be interesting this year for McLaren. I think they do have the pace overall, the challenge with Penske and Ganassi, and we'll see what they're able to do at the Indy 500. And then like you said, with Kyle Larson, they're committing to him for 2 years, not just one. So it's going to be interesting with Larson coming in for the Indy 500 only for 2 years, what that's going to do to the team and give them more chances, I guess, in the future. Even though we're talking about what they're able to do in 23, I think his presence there will probably help them, as he's probably going to be doing some testing this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic is next year. But I think because that news came out today, I think that's a good point to bring up here. So we'll see. We'll see what they're able to do this year. But I look at them as potentially being a potential challenger to the rest of the big teams in this series.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I mean, we look at those big teams and another big team that, I mean, you mentioned them because it's Alexander Rossi's moving over from there, is Andretti Autosport. Now, I've been spending the last couple of days on the Grid Talk podcast and on Aaron Harper's podcast, F1 podcast, talking about Andretti's Road to F1. And but they're still in IndyCar, and of course they're involved in many other series, Michael Andretti. But this year is a year unlike any other, I think, in a long time for Andretti Autosport, in that they have a very young organization, very young driver lineup. Uh, Roman Grosjean is the oldest driver, but he's definitely not the veteran. He's only in his second, or what is it, second full year, I think, as a full time driver. He ran 1 year just doing the road courses for Dale Coyne, and then he ran one oval, I think, there for Dale Coyne at Gateway, and then got hired last year to drive for Andretti in the DHL car, taking over for Ryan Hunter-Reay. So this is his second full year at Andretti. Colton Herta, who, of course, we talk about Formula One, there's rumors about him going there. But he doesn't have the super license points because of the stupidity of how super license points are given out. Uh, but I think, I mean, if there's one other challenger that I could venture out, and it would be kind of going out on a limb, based on the performance and testing, it looked like Andretti Autosport had speed. Now, of course, they're not racing at the Thermal Club for any race, but when you bring Kyle Kirkwood back into the fold after what was, for more all intents and purposes, a disaster of a year at AJ Foyt, where he crashed more than anything, but coming back to replacing Rossi and bringing a new, fresh, or like a fresher perspective, I think him coming in along with Colton Herta and Roman Grosjean, those three guys can carry the load at Andretti. Um, is it going to mean championship? I don't know. I think all three of them have different targets in their mind. You have Kyle Kirkwood, who's won everything on the in road Indy ladder. He wants to win. race. He wants to be competitive. I think he knows this is a long-term deal they're building with him, but they're also building with Colton Herta, and I think his target is not in IndyCar anymore. Yes, he wants to win. I know he wants to win that championship. Do something even his dad wasn't able to do stuff his dad wasn't able to do. And but I also think he wants to go to Formula One. So how does that distraction, kind of that double kind of deal in terms of Colton Herta, and he's a really young dude too. Been in this series since he was 17, 18 years old now. He's in his fifth, 6 years old. It's pretty crazy for Colton Herta, but he's the leader. He's the team leader now of this organization, and how is he going to handle that while also handling his own personal goals and hopes for the future, while bringing in the likes of Kyle Kirkwood, who is an Andretti guy from many years, coming back, and then Roman Grosjean, who on the one hand he is running an Indy car, but he's a Lamborghini factory driver and is going to be a part of their LMDH or whatever program here in with testing first of all, and then going into 2024 with with his goal, I think, to go move back to Europe and race in the WEC. So how does Andretti stack up to you, Josh? Before we kind of go over some of the other teams, kind of as a whole.
Yeah, I think, with Andretti, I mean, they have a lot that they need to be able to improve on, I think, to really be considered a top team once again. They've, I mean, we've alluded to with Rossi, but they've taken a lot of steps backwards in terms of, their ability to compete for the title compared to previous years. And, Colton Herta has been kind of their guy the last couple of seasons. And, even then, Colton Herta wasn't really that great last year compared to, what he was able to do in 21. Finishing, and he still won a race, but finished 10th in the standings last year, and we've seen what he's able to do with the ability and talent that he has, and people have raved about him and about his ability to go to Formula One potentially, but also had still a lot of consistency issues throughout the year. And unlike what kind of similar to what he had in 2021, but this year just wasn't on the same level of pace. Uh, and I think for Andretti, they've got to be able to improve in their I think it's not just the drivers, but just the their engineering department needs to be able to improve, to be able to get them back onto pace with the other teams. I mean, they've been pretty fast so far in early testing, but it looks like at least short run pace. They've been able to improve there, but we'll see. Long run. Throughout the season, throughout a course of one race, can they keep up with the rest of the rest of the field and make sure that their car stays balanced throughout the course of one race and everything. So I think just from a team perspective, they've got a lot to improve on there, and I think all their drivers in one way are going to benefit. I think Colton Herta. I think if they give him a good car, I think Colton Herta could be a long or outsider chance, I think, to potentially compete for the title if they give him a really good car and they truly have turned things around. So we'll see if they're able to do that, and we've seen what they can do. I mean, we've seen what Colton Herta has been able to do, and let me go back to 2 years ago and what he did at St. Petersburg, basically dominating that entire event, and the pace that he had at other tracks throughout the year. Look at what he was able to do at the first Nashville race, and would have won that one if he didn't make his own mistakes and everything. So, I think if the team can get out of its own way, and I think if the drivers can continue to be focused, I think, especially with Herta, I think they'll be right there with Penske and Ganassi and potentially even McLaren. So that's kind of what I'm thinking really for Andretti. I mean, of course, you have Grosjean as well. who, yeah, of course, with his commitments to Lamborghini, we have to wonder how much he really is committed to Andretti as a whole. I think he still enjoys IndyCar racing, but with the factory driver role at Lamborghini, there's a little bit of a conflict of interest in a way, even though their schedules aren't really going to conflict that much. But still, when you have two teams like that, I mean, obviously you're trying to maximize your income in a way, but at the same time, you begin your commitments start to favor one or the other, I think, and we'll see how the year goes for Roman if he's able to stay balanced between IndyCar and sports car racing. And then for the rest of the team, of course, Kyle Kirkwood coming back to the fold, and we seen what he was able to do last year at some places, he was with Foyt Racing and everything, and I think Kirkwood, he's definitely a guy that has a lot to prove, and I think definitely we'll see first year full time with Andretti what he's able to do, and if he can kind of compete or push Colton Herta, I think that's what I look out for with him. And then of course with Dylan DeFrancesco, he's kind of just there. So as long as he doesn't get into any incidents and doesn't, because I mean there were some times last year he got into some incidents that caused some controversies throughout the year. So as long as he stays out of the way, makes minimal mistakes, I think it'll be a okay year for DeFrancesco. And then by extension, I think we also should bring up Meyer Shank because they are a customer of Andretti, and I think they also felt some of the issues that Andretti was last year. With some of the things that they were experiencing with their parts. They had issues with their dampers and chassis setups because it also mirrored a lot of the issues that Andretti was facing throughout the entire year. So if Andretti as an organization can be more competent than what they have in the last 2 or 3 years, then I think that'll help Meyer Shank be a better team overall and help them with Elio Castroneves and Simon Pagino. So I think if those two teams can kind of improve, then certainly it will be helpful to everybody at Honda and everybody at those two organizations. So we'll see what happens, but I think Andretti, they definitely have their work cut out this year for them.
It's going to be an interesting year for sure with all the different things that Michael's having to do and what he's trying to deal with the notion that the what do you call his the I guess the goalposts keep moving in terms of his wanting to be in Formula One and how that affects him and some of his other business entities, along with building their new massive building. And in terms of Meyer Shank, they had a rough year last year, going to two cars. Alio really wasn't there for the majority of the year. I think Simon Pagino did a little better. I mean, you look at Pagino, finished 15th in points. Uh, Alio finished 18th in points, so only led one lap. They only led one lap the whole entire year. One podium, that was Pagino. So it was not a great year for them. It looks like Elio Castroneves, it seems like they're kind of already starting to move that this is going to be his final full time season with the team because I think they're going to put Tom Blomqvist in the car. They've been making that rumor. He tested the car. The guy who's won the Rolex 24 a month ago, and they've won it 2 consecutive years, right? Yes, they've won the Rolex 24 the last 2 years, and they won the series championship in IMSA. So there's changes coming along there. Now there's I think what three cars are going to have the Sirius XM whatever sponsorship on them with Kirkwood and those two cars of Meyer Shank as well. Some of the other teams, of course, we have to look at Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan. They have Green Rahal, who has a great ability in cultivating sponsors. He hasn't won in a long time. He's getting Eddie Jones back on his pit box. So the last time he won races was 6 years ago now. He had Eddie Jones on the box. So looking for that. He finished 11th in points. He keeps on aiming. He knows he wants to win Indy in the worst way to join his father in that. Um, he's had he's had his tough times and issues since that 2 win season in 2017, finishing sixth in points. He has finished in the top 10 or just outside of the top 10 like he was last year in each of the last 5 years. Didn't even have a podium last year. So that's are we seeing the downswing with him? Uh, but he also knows that him and Mike Lanigan's son are taking over the organization whenever their dads decide to quit. Uh, I think the person to look at from that team is Christian Lundgaard, who got moved into the high V 45, probably because Jack Harvey sucked. Um, Lundgaard has shown great pace on road courses. He ended up winning Rookie of the Year over David Malukas. It was a close battle, but uh, Rose, what do you call Lundgaard was able to pull it through. Another Formula Two transplant. So he's a guy to watch. They have a full sponsor, somebody that is supporting this series greatly and supporting that team. He's somebody that I think is a sleeper candidate in general. But especially with the majority of the races being on road courses, I think he's somebody that could kind of shuffle the deck a little bit. Harvey, I have no idea what he's going to do this year. I don't really have much of high hopes or any belief that he's going to do much of anything different than he did last year, which was essentially being a field filler. Uh, in terms of Ed Carpenter racing, you have Renus VK, who has won in the IndyCar series before. He had one pole and a podium last year. They're all sponsored. All three cars, when they have three cars out on the track, will be sponsored by Bit Nile, which is Connor Daly's sponsor. And of course, for Connor, his chase really is to win that first IndyCar race, but he really wants to win Indy worse than anything. His stepdad is the president of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, so it also helps. I'm pretty sure his car won't be a bucking Bronco with used parts from the scrap heap from behind the old Napa like he had at the Daytona 500 either. Ed Carpenter keeps on holding on for dear life, and looks more closer to retirement than he is being that competitive guy that he was a few years ago on the ovals. But it is his team; it's his choice. He can do whatever he wants in that sense. So I think for Rena's VK, he wants to go and show that he can keep progressing because that's the car that Newgarden drove a few years before and was able to get to Penske. And then I'm forgetting who took over for Newgarden, but he got sent. He should have been the guy that they picked for the 45 car last year too. Spencer Pigot, yeah. Pigot had moments here and there, but then he got cut off without having enough time to really prove himself. And then I think he was I might be wrong that he was in that McLaren SP team a couple of years ago. Oh no, that was the other that's the other guy I was thinking of. Now I'm just blanking. On He was another rookie uh, that year with Pato Award. Um,
Oh, Oscar, no,
Oliver
Oliver
Askew.
Askew. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, we got it. There you go. So good job. We finally got that one. So thank you for that. So he's another one, somebody to look at. I would think later on. Catherine Legg will be driving a fourth Rahal Letterman Lanigan car at Indy, and considering they don't have 33 cars, she's going to make the show. So it'll be nice to see Catherine Legg back in the Indianapolis 500. Uh, she runs with Sheena Monk in the Acura in GTD in IMSA. So it'll be nice to see her come back to the Indianapolis 500. Uh, After that, I'm trying to go through everybody. I don't want to go and leave anybody out really. I'll go through some of this. I mean, Dale Coyne this year is David Malukas is on his second year. Of course, his dad's really effing rich. He's so rich and has so much money. They have 9 cars in Indy Lights this year. So I think half the field is coming out of the Malukas shop. So take that for what it will. Can he go and make that step forward like a lot of other guys that Dale Coyne have over the years and then move himself up into a bigger team? Largely because, of course, his dad is rich. But he has talent. He showed it at Gateway last year that he has the skills to do it, and he showed on ovals and some road courses, but more on the ovals of his prowess. And I think it'll be something to look at. His teammate now this year will be rookie Stingray Robb, which is one of the greatest names ever in the history of man. Um, he's the hell's that guy in the truck series, the guy that the 45 driver.
Oh, we picked him on a couple weeks
Yeah,
ago.
picked him a couple weeks ago.
We have it right
Uh,
here.
yeah,
Wait, where is it? Um,
Lawless Allen.
Lawless
Yeah,
Allen. Yep.
so he wins there has to be an award for best name in the series, and Stingray Robb definitely is the best name in this series. He is a rookie coming from Indy Lights. He's had his moments there, so we'll see. The rookie class is definitely interesting this year. Stingray Robb, Benjamin Peterson coming from Indy Lights has a lot of money, not really shown much of anything otherwise. Driving for AJ Foyt, almost was going to drive the 88 car. Then the combination of the 14 and 88 leads to certain um, inferences for certain segments of the population or a certain segment of the population. So they change it to number 55. I don't care what his number is. He's probably going to crash a lot with his teammate Root Beer Floathead, who's coming back full time. The other rookies in this series this year are, I don't see that one. Of course, Marcus Armstrong, as I mentioned earlier, and then Augustin Canapino, who is driving for Juncos Hollander, and he's going to have a big learning curve, but it seems like his bigger learning curve is just trying to learn English. So to be able to have him uh, come over here and trying to become a great communicator and do the best he can, it seems like he's great representation. They're doing testing in his country. I'm forgetting what the yeah, yeah, and then trying to go and see over here, new for 23, Argentina, yeah, touring car champion. So you're going from uh driving a sedan to driving an Indy car, and it's going to be a big transition for him. But it sounds like he has a lot of talent, a lot of ability. Uh, that I would look at in terms of the rookie battle. I think Stingray Robb has the advantage, money, but also the team that he has around him and the teammate he has, I think gives him an advantage initially in terms of the rookie battle. And then, I mean, there are uh, 27 cars that will run in this first race of the season. That's full time cars, so that's the biggest field they've had in a long, long time, which is great to see. Uh, but there are issues, of course, that we've gone over here on the show that have to be addressed, short term and long term, for the series and how they've dealt with the feeder series as well. Before we make our predictions for St. Petersburg, want to make predictions for the championship and the top three. Uh, I'm gonna go. I'll go first here, and we can get that picks channel up there and start putting that in there. I'm picking Scott Dixon to win number 7 this year. It's they won at They won with Alex Palou, but otherwise, I mean, it's been on and off. 1 year Penske, 1 year Ganassi. It kind of goes that way. I say that Dixon wins a championship. I say Joseph Newgarden finishes second again in the championship. Um, I believe one of those two wins the Indianapolis 500. That's another kind of a thing that we can go back on and see if we're right on that. Third place in the championship, I think, will be Pato Award. So, considering last year how dominant Penske was, I'm saying this year, I figure Penske will be up there. They'll be within that realm with uh, the likes of Ganassi and, of course, with McLaren. But that's who I pick for my top three. Josh, who are you looking at for your top three and title winner for this year in IndyCar?
This year in IndyCar, I think Joseph Newgarden wins the title, so I'll put him in first place there. I'm gonna say that Pato Award finishes in second, and then I think third place. I'm gonna go with Scott Dixon third place. So basically, I think I have the same guys you did, but I have a different order. So I think Joseph Newgarden gets his win or his third title this year.
Yeah, I don't think that. I think those are. We both were on the same realm in terms of the drivers, but we could just as easily see Scott McLaughlin take that next step forward, the multi time supercars champion. Will Power, of course, he wants to win another title. It took him enough years to win that second one. And then you can I think there's guys within the Ganassi. Palou may have something there, even though he's in a lame duck year. You also have to consider the other two uh, guys at McLaren for sure. And I mean, Colton Herta wants to go to Formula One. The easiest way for him to go to Formula One is win a championship. So that would be something. Andretti Autosport has not won an IndyCar title since Ryan Hunter-Reay in 2012. So it'll be something if they were able to do that. And who knows? It's a deep field. Qualifying and getting out of the first round of qualifying is going to be very difficult in the IndyCar series this year. So that'll be something to look at, especially on the road courses. The Saint Grand Prix of St. Petersburg, we've kind of gotten into some of the drivers uh, and people to look at for the season. In terms of this race, though, the history of this race in recent years, you look at, as I mentioned, the Scott McLaughlin won last year, Colton Herta in 21, Joseph Newgarden in 2020, um, 19 and 20. Prior to that, Sebastian Bourdais, the local St. Petersburg resident these days, won 2 years in a row for Dale Coyne. And then prior to that, 2 years in a row for Juan Pablo Monterior and Will Power in 2014, Manica Patrick in 2013, aka James Hinchcliffe, Elio Castro Dash Neves in 2012, so he's still out there, Dario Franchitti in 11, Will Power in 10, Ryan Briscoe in 2009, Green Hall in 2008. Elio Castro Neves was a three-time winner at St. Pete back in the day. The late Dan Weldon won in 2005, and one of the corner that is basically the one of the better passing zones on the whole entire racetrack is named after Dan Weldon. So we'll hear about Dan Weldon Way a lot during this weekend. Josh, I'll let you go and make your picks this weekend. Who do you think will win, and who do you think will be on the podium for this weekend's uh, Firestone Grand Prix of St. Petersburg?
I think this weekend. Yeah, I'm gonna go interesting here. I mean, I just faded him for the championship, but let's have Pato O'Ward take home the win this weekend in St. Petersburg. So I'll go with him winning the race. Podium, Colton Herta, pick him to finish in second. And then third place, go with Joseph Newgarden or third place. So yeah, that's what I'll go with. Should be interesting. I think Colton won 2 years ago, but I think Pato, I think he's got a lot to prove. Like we talked about, McLaren, they come out, have the best car this weekend, and they go and win here in St. Petersburg.
That would be progression for them, considering for a good part of the early season they were not giving Pato the car that he needed. I think now with Alexander Rossi being there, extra data sharing, and some of the additions that they made to the organization, I I think that that's a very valid choice. I like that choice, of course, because I'm a Pato Ward guy, so I would sign for that. And watching Colton Herta lose to him kind of makes me happy. Um, for me, I'm gonna go with. I mean, I that would be the. I mean, I would probably given that a thought in terms of going to Pato. I'm gonna go with. There's been the history shows a lot of repeats. It hasn't happened in recent years, but I'm gonna say Scotty McLaughlin repeats as the winner at St. Petersburg. So 2 years in a row for him. Starts off his campaign in 2023 with a victory, and he almost won the first two races of the season, getting passed on the outside on the last lap by Joseph Newgarden at Texas, which will be the PPG 375 this year. So I picked Scott McLaughlin to win. My second place finisher will be. I'm gonna go and get kind of frisky with it. I'm gonna go and say Kyle Kirkwood goes and finishes on the podium, gets his first career IndyCar podium on Sunday for Andretti, and then third place, I'll say is I'll say I'll say Scott Dixon. Dixon has never won there. It'll be yet another year that he hasn't won there, but Scott Dixon goes and gets a podium there. But I'm taking I'm I'm making the picks that kind of is like will go out the wall because I'm not guaranteeing anything. I don't say to anybody to go and bet on my picks because my fantasy teams prove that I generally am not, no matter using knowledge and understanding of recent history doesn't really make a difference. So there's that. Uh, we will see and we will talk about this race, of course, next week on episode 159 of the GSP. We'll move on from one open wheel series starting their 2023 campaign to another one. This one being the Formula One World Championship. Lots of drama and controversy, FIA, FOM, the issues with the gag of sorts on drivers to express some of their thoughts on and beliefs or whatever in regards to certain issues, which is really a target on Lewis Hamilton. But there's also the issue with Andretti trying to get an F1, and now they're keep on moving the goalposts. Statman Carruthers from the what do you call why am I forgetting? I forget everything when I'm on the show. I need to remember crap, and then I never remember it. The I have it right here. Just give me a second. They have, and it's not all about IndyCar. That's not it. Gonna swap to goddamn Colleen. Gotta love Instagram. Trying to find it. The super. What the heck is the one that Tony Stewart? He went and did a episode with them recently, and they've been friends for a long time. Let's Statman Carruthers. What's the other? And it's Kenny and Crash. Uh, but they're married. They have the daughter. The heck's the name of that thing? I follow them too. Oh, dang it. Trying to find it here. If I don't find it, I guess it is what it is. But because and yeah, Kenny Sargent. Yeah, what does he do? What the heck? Why am I forgetting? Ugh, damn it. It's I'm gonna look it up. So Kenny Sargent Speed Freaks. There you go. Thank you. Finally got it. The Speed Freaks. Statman Carruthers was saying it's just business because FIA or Formula One now being a part of Liberty Media, they're on the stock exchange. So based on their number and how much they're worth, uh, they're trying to get fair market value. It's a great explanation by him, basically saying that what they're doing in regards to continuing to move these goalposts is essentially trying to get fair market value if they want somebody to come into F1, knowing that each team is worth probably on top of what they're already worth a couple $1 billion on top of it, or hundreds of millions of dollars on top of it. One piece that has come out recently is AlphaTauri may be on sale because Red Bull, in general, is starting to look at all their entities within business, and they're seeing that the AlphaTauri team has been a loser in the sense of money and business, so that might be the end. Something to look at for the future, though. But speaking of Red Bull, speaking of a guy who was definitely is rolling in the money, he had to pay over $1 million for his super license. Fish Lips Max Verstappen became a legitimate world champion last year, winning 15 races. Uh, it'll say in the stats that he's a two-time world champion, but we can let that go. He dominated. It really wasn't much of a series most of the year, largely due to the fact that Ferrari basically dick stepped themselves most of the year. And if they didn't do it to themselves, if the driver didn't do it, the team did it. If it wasn't the driver or the team, the car failed. So the initial question, I guess, Josh, is does Max Verstappen continue this onslaught into 2023 uh, and dominate another year, or do Ferrari and Mercedes have answers? I mean, we only have one test to show for it. We only have some conjecture from every team and some of the drivers. But does 2023 in the second year of this new Aero formula open up the doors for those two organizations to get back in the mix to contend with Red Bull and Verstappen?
I mean, it's tough to say. I think early on, I mean, I can't say like later in the year, but at least like the first part of the year, I think it's gonna be Red Bull. I'm not gonna say the whole year because there's definitely time to catch up, but I think right now Red Bull's still the best in terms of pace. I think Verstappen, they are going to continue to put their best behind Verstappen. So I think he's going to come out and probably, I mean, early prediction. I mean, we may as well say it that I think he'll win the opening race at Bahrain. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough early on. I mean, Mercedes, their pace. Still not quite where they need it to be. I mean, it's a good baseline, I think, from maybe last year. So it's better than last year, but is it as better than Red Bull or on pace with Red Bull? Probably not. So at least right now, but there's still time throughout the year to get better, and things can change throughout the season, and certainly there's always luck that factors in as well. But I mean, looks like they're porpoising for Mercedes. Still, I mean, it's not really an issue anymore. So but they still have some issues with handling day two of testing. They had issues, at least with Hamilton. They had issues with handling, but yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. And then I think, Ferrari, I mean, I expect Ferrari to be closer to Red Bull, but it still seems like they're still trying to, at least according to Leclerc, still trying to find that sweet spot with their new car, going into the first race this weekend. So, I mean, I think early on the first, 4 or 5 races of the year, I think you can probably expect Red Bull to still be up front dominating in Formula One. But I think maybe throughout the course of the year, I think Red or Ferrari, I think they'll find their groove. I think Mercedes, especially as the year goes on, I think they'll be better. And I think for Mercedes, and I think their fans in Hamilton, I think they'd like to try to give Lewis a good enough car to at least win one race, and get back in the winners column. So, after being winless last year, so we'll see what happens. But I think early on, I think Verstappen gonna be the guy, and we'll see how Perez does as well. But overall, at least to start off, it'll be more of the same.
Yeah, I mean Perez is a hired lapdog for Red Bull, and he'll just move over and take it as long as Karen's guy can get the victory or whatever. So we know that Ferrari is more equal, and Mercedes in that scenario. George Russell, of course, came into the team last year, was able to deal with the car, I think, a lot better initially, and was more consistent than Lewis. And yes, Lewis was working on different things to get the car better because of his vast knowledge and time, not only in the team but just his experience. But George Russell did win the pole after the sprint race at Brazil, and then won the Brazilian Grand Prix over Lewis Hamilton, the only double podium they had the whole year, the highlight of the year, really. But I think for those two organizations, it's more about, maximizing their package to the greatest extent. For Ferrari, trying Fred Vasseur coming into the fold, trying to bring a lot more control, bring a lot more, um, not just continuity, but bring a semblance of intelligence and logic to a lot of the decisions they're making, and making it easier on Charles Leclerc, who is known to overthink things and go and make bad mistakes. Give Carlos Sainz an opportunity to go and maybe take that step forward and become a championship contender with a car that was pretty much the second best car for a good amount of the year, for at least the first part of the year, and ended up number two largely because of their advantages they had over Mercedes through the first part of the season. I do think Lewis will come back and at least win one race and one pole, um, but I don't know what it'll look like in terms of contending for a championship. I do feel if Mercedes does have a championship hope, I think it'll be more on the likes of George. I think George is starting to build himself up and build his confidence. But you can never count out Lewis Hamilton at the end of the greatest ever. But Max, I do agree, is going to win this race at Bahrain. I think he'll win at Saudi the following week. The changes and upgrades that'll come after that is where I think we really have to start looking. That's like the few weeks after break between Saudi and Australia, and I think there's another break after that as well. Um, they're gonna have time and to go and make things happen there. They'll have 2 weeks between Saudi and Australia, and then they have a month's break between uh, the Australian Grand Prix in Azerbaijan. Uh, so Campos race. Oh, Gina and her name's but going on the Formula One uh circuit or Formula One page, track will feature the eighth revised configuration. The revised configuration is the original configuration anyway. That's it's basically the original configuration of the racetrack that they had, minus uh that one one left-hander. It used to be two left-handers. Now they just made it a sweeping left. Um, or I don't know if they still use that, or if they use that part, the two double left-handers instead of the sweeping left. That might be the only difference there. But I think that Australia is where we're going to finally see if Mercedes has something. Ferrari's going to be the one that has to kind of pick up the slack, at least for the first couple of races of the season. I mean, that kind of goes answers to that question that I had about George or Lewis. I I'll never doubt Lewis, but I think George is starting to show his mettle, and his ability to get the job done. Midfield battle and driver changes, Josh. There's plenty to go in on that. The drivers, I mean, last year the midfield battle started with McLaren and Alpine. Testing has shown that McLaren is definitely on the back foot. Alpine has had some struggles as well. On the flip side of that is Fred Alonso and Aston Martin showing a lot of pace in testing. He was the only one testing because Lance Stroll crashed off a bike, and there's been various rumors of what his injuries are. Sounds like he has two broken wrists. So if he has two broken wrists, I have a hard time believing that guy is going to drive, especially a Formula One car, which would open up the door for 2022 Formula 2 world champion Felipe Drogovic to end up on the F1 grid at least temporarily for a few races, make his debut along with other debutants from F2 and elsewhere. Getting into the driver changes, of course, Pierre Gasly moves from AlphaTauri to Alpine to make an all-French lineup with Esteban Ocon. Oscar Piastri, former Alpine development driver, moves to McLaren, taking over for Daniel Ricciardo. He'll be driving the number 81. Valtteri Bottas doing his best KK Rosberg impression, and Guan Yu Zhou, or Zhou Guan Yu, they'll continue for a second year together. Alonso, as I mentioned, moves over to Aston Martin, replacing the retired Sebastian Vettel. Nico Hulkenberg comes back to Formula One as a full-time driver for Haas, taking over for Mick Schumacher, while Kevin Magnussen continues in his ride. Nick DeVries moves from being a Mercedes junior driver and driving for I don't know how many teams last year to become a full-time driver at AlphaTauri, replacing Pierre Gasly to drive alongside Yuki Tsunoda. And then Logan Sargent becomes the first American driver since Alexander Rossi back in 2015, and the first full-time American driver since Scott Speed in 2006, because he didn't get to finish the 2007 season. So that it's a long time coming. 17 years for a full-time ride for an American driver, and 8 years since the last time an American was on the grid. So definitely a lot of changes there. But I'd focus on the midfield. We go and look at the four teams. I would say, what is it? McLaren, Alpine, Aston Martin, and Alfa Romeo. Those are the teams that were up there last year in those positions, um, in terms of the constructors. I'm going to go back. It was Alpine, then McLaren, Alfa Romeo, and Aston Martin. Were Alfa Romeo and Aston Martin tied in for points in last year. So right now, as it stands, Alpine and McLaren are on the back foot. From this test, we don't know what they're going to bring to the table on Friday in FP1 and FP2, but Definitely curious if that pace is something to be worried about or not. It sounds like McLaren definitely is worried. They are concerned. So it's not a good look for them. And Alpha Romeo with Zhou Guanyu set a quick time during testing during one of the sessions. So that is a pleasant surprise, of course. Trying to prove his mettle and his worth here in Formula One, not only short term but long term, with that team becoming Audi's Formula One team here in a few years. And then, of course, I mentioned Alonso running fast all through the weekend in the test. Those four teams that comprises the midfield really. What are your thoughts on some of those changes and what you expect, Josh, from at least initially? I mean, I think these first two races are back to back, so whatever you kind of see is, even though they're two different racetracks, I think the form is kind of going to be there the same way for the first two races. Little changes are going to come for Australia, um, but there's a definite chance for things to change around amongst that quartet based on at least early takeaways.
I mean, I think with, some of these teams, I think especially McLaren, I mean, I thought they would be better than what they are right now. It's almost like they regressed from where they were last year at the end of the year. I thought maybe they would begin to try to make a breakthrough into the stage of Mercedes and Red Bull and Ferrari, but it looks like they haven't just had the pace. They've been slow throughout preseason testing, so I'm not really sure what they're going to do this year in terms of their ability. And I feel like it's going to be another year based on what their pace is. Going to be another year where they struggle for most of the year, and then maybe they figure it out like towards after the summer break and or something like that, and finally manage to get something together at the end of the year. So um, eh, that's kind of why I was alluding to earlier when we were talking about McLaren and IndyCar, that I think they have a better chance of winning the IndyCar title than they do the F1 title, not because they're going up against Red Bull and whatnot, but more so the fact that they just haven't really looked as competitive as what I thought they'd be uh, in so far this year in testing. So it's kind of thinking there. But I think I'm really surprised with the pace that Zhou Gnu showed in uh, testing so far. Of course, had the fast lap, led testing, at one point and everything, and then I think with Alpha, seems like they're y- you know, looks like maybe they might actually be one of the better midfield teams this season. And of course, he's a second year driver now. And of course, he got his teammate Valtteri Bottas, who, on the non racing side of things, he could be a very popular guy here in America. He's got all the looks and everything to be popular here in America, as America continues to embrace more F1 and everything. But he's certainly got a lot of experience as well, and I think he definitely can be uh, fairly consistent for that organization throughout the entire year. So I'd look for Alpha to be a lot better than what they were last year, and certainly be closer to um, the big players in Red Bull and Mercedes, Ferrari. In this group of midfield teams there. So that'll be interesting to look at throughout the year how they progress. I think with Aston Martin. I mean, first of all, Lance Stroll. Unfortunate that he got into the cycling accident and everything, and we'll have to wait and see where he goes from there. But looks like Alonso could be quick. Was likely to be his uh, probably his last, career ride, but, he's been fairly competitive so far in times. Uh, of course, 3rd best time on the Friday of testing and everything. So, I think, he has a lot, to prove, and he's also been talking a big game, so far, you know, as a member of Aston Martin. So maybe L Plan is coming together finally for uh, Alonso there. So we'll have to see. But they could be another surprise along with Alfa Romeo. But then also you alluded to Alpine. Of course, they've been struggling, and that'd be interesting to see how they play out. This year, of course, going through some changes in their driver lineup. Um, I think they still have a lot of things to you know go out. I mean, they have Pierre Gasly, who's been proven in the AlphaTauris, but so far this year they haven't had the pace that maybe they would have liked. And then Esteban, of course, who's been there for a few years now, just not on pace. Although certainly is always possible that Esteban could be a threat for victory or for a podium at some of these circuits this year. But um, yeah, I think Alpine, kind of in the same realm that McLaren is, like you said earlier, just haven't had the pace. But they have made slightly quiet progress throughout testing. So I think maybe they will be better than what we think, but certainly not as good as what we like initially like what we thought, but better than uh what we might be projecting right now. So we'll have to see throughout the rest of the year, but should be interesting in the midfield. And I'm just really curious, just on pace alone, how Alpha is going to do. But I think it's going to be an interesting midfield battle, and we may see some drivers challenging for positions late in some of these races that we wouldn't have thought they would be able to. So should be interesting. As we continue throughout the um, first couple of races, how things begin to settle in throughout all the um, pace and that these teams have been showing throughout testing.
Yeah, and that's something to find. We're gonna find out, of course. Practice on Friday will kind of open up some windows to what to expect initially. I think qualifying will be its own battle as well, but I think practice will show one sign, and then qualifying on Saturday will open up some further windows. It's a track that you can overtake on, so it's medium in terms of wear and tire wear, and also on roughness. So that's something that we have to see, and especially with the midfield when they're battling for those points, you need every point. It's wind tunnel time. It's all those development things within this new cost cap. So every point counts, every dollar counts in that sense. The last three teams uh, that were in the championship last year were Haas, AlphaTauri, and Williams. In Haas, they get one new driver, a veteran in Hulkenberg, who's been around a long time, never finished on a podium in his career. Uh, you have AlphaTauri, who has one new driver in Nick DeVries, has plenty of pedigree, Formula E world champion, ran with the Mercedes outfit for a while, has run another other series, and ran for Williams, finished in the points, ran for Aston Martin for a little, like I think at least for a practice, ran in the Mercedes car. So I think he drove three or four cars last year. uh, Yuki Tsunoda in another third year, I think in the third year in the series. Kind of a prove it year, I would think, for him. And then Williams, as I mentioned, with Alexander Albon and Logan Sargent. Now, to me, I don't see much movement there. Maybe Haas can make a little progress because now they've kind of taken care of some redundancies, and they've adjusted some things to maximize their money. They do have new sponsor in MoneyGram. And have some other sponsors there as well, so that could help. But it is Gene Haas. It is an entity that he's involved in, and generally outside of Stewart in terms of his racing outfits. They've generally run in the back outside of when Tony Stewart took 51% of the team over that is now Stewart Haas Racing. I don't know what they're going to do. I know Kevin Magnussen had that amazing pole, and it was a great story, and he ran decently in the sprint in Brazil, but it was kind of stop and start, very it didn't seem like there was any real consistency. Probably didn't help that Mick made some mistakes and had some big wrecks, but in the grand scheme of things, that's what you expect from a guy who's pushing and he's trying to keep a job. But now he's going to be the test driver for Mercedes, so probably did better by getting let go by Haas anyway and leaving the Ferrari driver development program. Uh, in terms of AlphaTauri, they're interesting. Uh, didn't show a whole lot of pace, but they have DeVries. I think he's somebody that there's a lot of potential there. He's an older driver relative to what you when you're coming into Formula One, but I think there's a lot of potential there. Um, I think the biggest problem for them is, are they going to be sold? And if they're going to be sold, who's going to buy them? I think that's the biggest issue. Plus, of course, the car and the performance. But I think that's the biggest thing hanging over their heads, and that isn't going to help them in regards to trying to perform and do what they need to do to move back up the grid as they had been the last few years prior to this rule change. And then Williams, Albon's going to do the best he can. I don't know if he has it in him to kind of pull like what George Russell did in 2021. They are good friends, but I don't know if Williams has the car. Um, I think it's more of a long term development uh, idea, and that's part of the reason why they're putting Logan Sargent in the second seat because they're leveraging an American driver who has talent and potential, has some marketability. They're going to try to introduce him to the American public, of course, and I think get him out there. And he has talent. He has one in F3, he's one in F2. He was about to come to IndyCar prior to Williams kind of saving him, and now he's going to be in Formula One. So it's going to be cool, nice to look at that story as the year goes on. It's going to be a long learning process and a tough learning curve, but in the end, it's better having Logan Sargent out there, who's out there based on merit, instead of Nicholas Latifi, who's out there based on his dad's businesses. Uh, what are your thoughts on those three teams, Josh? Before we move forward, make our picks for the drivers' championship and constructors.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up AlphaTauri, and I think I feel like it wasn't too long ago that they had better pace and or certainly than more we're giving them more. They've been doing a lot better than what we've been giving them credit for, I think. But um, I think it's interesting, in testing, they've been somewhat quick. Nick DeVries, finished 4th place day 2 testing. So interesting that they have him who's been pretty good and outside of Formula One, and now he's having his chance. So be curious to see how he does throughout the year. But then on the other end, Yuki Tsunoda just hasn't looked like he's had really the pace that he's needed to be up there with his teammate. So kind of almost like two contrasting things. So be interesting to see how AlphaTauri does throughout throughout the year. But I still feel like they could be better than being like at towards the bottom of the tiers of F1 teams, I think. But maybe they are trending downwards, but think they still have a little bit left to say. And I think Williams, of course, Logan Sargent, I think big name, well, relatively speaking. Certainly, I think I agree with you there. Um, American presence in Formula One. So I think we'll see what he's able to do this year in the Williams. What kind of results can he get? not going to be really competitive, I think. But can he push for potentially a points finish? We've seen Alex Albon do that last year. Could he do the same thing and get some PR from it? Certainly would be interesting to play out. Don't think they'll really have the pace, but like what Alex Albon did last year, can they have the same strategy at some of the circuits where it'll favor them to um, you know skip on tires and try to maximize their finish at the end? We'll have to see, but that's likely how they're gonna have to scrap for some of these finishes later on in the year. Albon, I mean, kind of the same deal there. Can they be a surprise at some of these races like they were last year? But I think Albon certainly has potential, but I think both of him and Logan Sargent kind of both there for the long haul at Williams, and then Haas, like you talked about earlier. I mean, it's hard to really see them really being anything. Of course, last year they had a pole at Brazil, but they didn't really have much else to show for it. And I mean, of course, they did somewhat decently quick at testing so far this year with Nico Hulkenberg, but overall they're still a backmarker team in this series. So yeah, I mean it would be interesting if they can improve in their results. But I mean, I think they're going to be better than certainly what they were a couple of years ago. But I don't see them being any better than what they were last year. So we'll see what Haas can do if they can prove us wrong and be more consistent. But that's not really have much forward looking outlook for that team overall in Formula One.
And that's something we'll find out, I think, over time with Haas if they are serious. I think this is a year where they really are. They have two veteran drivers. It'll be a time to start making that move forward. What is AlphaTauri going to be, or where they're going to be, or who they're going to be, is probably going to take up a lot of time with them. And in turn, it may give cover to Yuki Tsunoda, and it'll also give cover to Nick DeVries to try to figure things out. Williams is more about, I think, doing good PR and marketing and doing well at the U.S. rounds and some of these other rounds accordingly and picking their spots. The rookie class, just to go through it, they're the rookies for this year are Oscar Piastri at McLaren, and Nick DeVries is considered a rookie, and Logan Sargent. Uh, Based on experience, I would think that Nick DeVries is ahead on that. Based on car, I don't think any of them are essentially in a great car at the moment. So, I mean, the talent is in Piastri's favor because he's won F3, F2. He's considered one of the great talents out of Australia in a long time. And so, if McLaren figures it out, I think it'll be pretty straightforward for him. But I think Nick DeVries will give him a fight, given if his car actually shows up for him too. The Let's get into the driver and constructors championship picks. I picked first for IndyCar, so I'll give you the floor, Josh, in terms of Formula One for the um, the picks for the championship and constructors.
I mean, it's hard to go against him, but I'm gonna go with Max Verstappen winning for the third year in a row in F1, but I don't think it'll be as easy as what it looked like last year. I think it'll be a little bit more challenged, and he won't have locked it up relatively early like he did last year. I think definitely be a lot closer before he wraps it up, and potentially even to come down to the final race where he has to kind of like his first title in 21, where in battle with Lewis Hamilton could end up being like that. But I do think Max Verstappen still ends up being the the drivers champion this year. And then likewise, still gonna go with Red Bull as the overall constructors champion this year in F1. I think along with Verstappen, I think Perez has proven to have consistent results throughout the year. So look for him to be a sporting teammate to Verstappen, and then potentially maybe he gets a win or two himself throughout the year.
Yeah, so I just I'm gonna save everybody the time here. We've gone through a lot of it, so I just said ditto. Um, one because I don't want to give breath to Fish Lips or Karen Horner. So yeah, I have a very hard time believing the stat it will be a battle like Josh said. I think it'll be a little harder for them, but you already have the best car. They put the guy over, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I think it's gonna go that way again here in 2023. And I think we both picked uh, Fish Lips to win the race on Sunday, but we also we need to pick who else is gonna finish on the podium, and maybe could put in something in regards to uh, pole. Fish Lips wins. My picks for the podium. What did I say on Grid Talk? I think I said Charles Leclerc. I believe I said Charles Leclerc. I might have said Carlos Sainz. I don't remember. I'm going to say Charles Leclerc finishes second, and George Russell finishes third. It's a representation from all three big teams. Um, Leclerc second, and GR third. There is a curse of people who win at Bahrain don't win the world championship, so I'm hoping that Max Verstappen wins and that follows through, but I don't think that's going to matter. I think that Leclerc qualifies on pole on Saturday, but Verstappen will be on the front row and he'll be able to make the better start and control the race from there. What are you looking at, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I can say I disagree with you there. I mean, I could agree with you on Ferrari taking pole. They kind of had a lot of races where they took pole position last year, but then they weren't able to follow through with that on wins. So I can see Verstappen having a better race per se than maybe qualifying pace versus Ferrari. So yeah, I'll go with Ferrari, not Ferrari, but Red Bull with Verstappen winning the race. But podium, I'm gonna go with uh, Lewis. I'll say Lewis in third. He gets third place, and then I'll say Charles Leclerc gets second. So
Oh, so Josh goes. Uh, we're chalk for both of the picks.
yeah,
Uh, First two picks, and we just switched the Mercedes drivers. They're second, and LH third. And what about qualifying? You feel
yeah.
like
Leclerc gets
Mercedes?
pole.
Okay. Both picked where. All right. So we will see what happens with that. Uh, if Aston Martin definitely has that pace, who's driving a second Aston Martin, and some of the other pieces, some of the other second drivers, what they're going to do, what the rookies can do in their first race of this new 2023 in the 2023 season, the longest season in Formula One history. After all of that, we still got plenty of show to go. We got the roundup coming up right now, talking about the uh, Formula E series that ran at Cape Town, South Africa this past weekend for the fifth round of their series. So I'm trying to get this up on. Yeah, so there you go. News. It's not loading. What is that? Right now, the Ada DaCosta going and winning. I think that's trying to refresh that there. It looks like, yeah, Antonio Felix DaCosta gets the win there. Withdraws from, oh boy, that's not good. Yeah, so Antonio Felix DaCosta gets the victory for Porsche, the former champion over another former champion, John Eric Verne, for DS Penske. In second, Nick Cassidy. In third for Envision, Rene Rast for McLaren. Fourth, Sebastian Buemi, former champion for Envision. Fifth, Dan Ticktum. Sixth, Stoffel Van Dorn, defending world champion for the DS Penske team. And seventh, Norman Nato for Nissan. And eighth, Andre Lauderer for Andretti. And ninth, and McLaren's Jake Hughes rounds out the top 10. So that was the fifth round of the championship. Now they'll take a 1 month break till the Sao Paulo E-Prix and obviously in Brazil. The point standings as of now, Pascal Wehrlein didn't score in South Africa, but is still the points leader. Jake Dennis has gone 2 consecutive races without scoring points, but he's still second, 18 points behind. Jean-Eric Verne followed up his win at India with a second place finish and is now in third place. 4 points out of DaCosta, who's now come off of a third place and a first place. Nick Cassidy, second and third the last 2 rounds, so they're third, fourth, and fifth. Buemi, Rene Rast, Sam Bird, who hasn't scored in the last 2 rounds. Jake Hughes, who got points there is tied with Bird. And then Luca de Grassi, who has a third place finish in Mexico and nothing else, is tied with Andre Lauderer for 10th in points. So we'll talk about them and the Formula E in a month's time. Porsche is now still has the lead. They're up by 26 and 42 points on Envision. Envision has a 4-point lead on Andretti. McLaren, DS Penske round out the top 5. Apt has still not scored points this season. The Mahindra team had to withdraw, so that definitely didn't help their cause last week. World Superbikes ran at Phillip Island to start their season, and trying to get sets his eyes on it. Okay. The port. I guess that's the first race of the series there. In World Superbike, next minimum weight. And the results in race 1 at Phillip Island, Johnny Ray over Toprak Raskat-Lioku. Alex Lowe's finished third. Alvaro Bautista finished fifth behind Andrea Locatelli. So the 2 Yamaha factory riders, second and fourth. The 2 Kawasaki factory riders, first and third. Garrett Gerloff on a BMW. His first race on a BMW, finished sixth. So good news for him. I'm trying to go through there. Is this from last year? Yeah, it is. Doesn't make sense then. All right, lovely. They didn't even bother to put up. So now I have to go and look for that. I'm like, that seems weird. Well, that's why, because they haven't updated it yet. Superbike Championship. I have to go and put up all these dang links or something for myself. In race 1 on, or what is it, Alvaro Bautista So Alvaro Bautista had a clean sweep of all the 2 races and the Super Pole race. And race 1, he beat Johnny Ray and Toprak Rascatlioku. In race 2, Bautista beat his teammate Michael Ruben Rinaldi and Andrea Locatelli. In a sprint in a Super Bowl race, so does Bautista, Ruben Rinaldi, Rascatlioku. The current points after one round, Bautista has a 28-point lead on Andrea Locatelli, 31 on Ray and Ruben Rinaldi. Axel Bassani is in 5th. Let's look over here. Garrett Gerloff ended up scoring 8 points to start his campaign. He's only behind Scott Redding by 2 for BMW riders, and he's only 2 points behind the guy that replaced him at the Satellite Yamaha program in Remy Gardner. Something to look at as the season goes on in the World Superbike Championship. Then F2 and F3 series will start in Bahrain. Has been done that in the past, but they are this year, or at least F2 has, but not F3. The drivers this year for the Formula 2 championship, you have Dennis Hauger taking over the one car, which was, of course, the team that won the championship with Felipe Drogovic. Jehan Daruvla moves over as the second driver there. Zane Maloney comes from Formula 3 and is joined by Enzo Fittipaldi. They'll be driving for the Rodin Carlin effort. That was the team that Logan Sargent was driving for last year. ART will have Teo Pocher and Victor Martins racing there. Martins has been in Formula 3 last couple of years. Pocher has been in Formula 2. One of the younger prospects, Ferrari, and Sauber Jr. Prema is going to be running Frederick Vesti and Oliver Bierman. Vesti is somebody to look at. Jack Crawford, the American, moves up from Formula 3 along with Isaac Hadjar. So for high tech, the Dams team will have Iwasa and Artur Leclerc coming up from Formula 3. Invicta Virtuosi Racing will have Jack Doohan, who is a Alpine development driver, and Amory Cordial. Roy Nissany continues his chase to be mediocre in the Charus team with Brad Benavides, another American on the grid. So there's 2 Americans on the grid this year in Formula 2. So that'll be something to look at, along with a couple of Indian drivers. Roman Stanek, Clement Novalak for Trident, Richard Vashor, Juan Manuel Correa. So, 3 Americans, sorry. Ferran Amsfort Racing. So, 3 Americans and 2 Indian drivers with Kush Miney and Ralph Beauchamp Campos. So, 2 Indian drivers, 3 American drivers. Pretty cool. I would look at those teams that finished up front. I think Teo Pocher is somebody I would venture to say is an early title favorite because he's around a lot of guys that don't have as much experience. Dennis Hauger is another one to look at, along with Vesti. I think those 3 guys are going to be ones to watch initially here this season in Formula 2, but we'll find out what they do at Bahrain. In Formula 3, the drivers for the team for Prema, defending champions, they've been up there for a while. They're gonna run Paul Aaron in the number 1 car. Estonian driver Dino Begonovic is a Swedish driver, and then Zach O'Sullivan, the Williams junior driver, the British driver, will be the third driver for them. Then I wish we could just move through, but can't do it. For Trident, I've never heard of any of these people. Fornaroli, Bortoletto, he's Brazilian. Goth, German, looks like he's 12. So yeah, that's for Trident team. They finished second last year in constructors or for teams championship. Kalen Frederick moves over to ART to team with Gregoire Saucy and Nikola Tozlov, a Bulgarian. Saucy, the Swiss driver. Frederick, the American. So looking to make progress from last couple of years in the championship. We'll see what he can do there. Franco Colapinto, Mari Boya, and Johnny Edgar will make up the MP Motorsports team. So Edgar is somebody I would think he brings a little bit of money to the table. But Franco Colapinto is out there last year, so he has experience, somebody that probably would be one to look for early in the season. High Tech has Sebastian Montoya, is the son of course, of Juan Pablo Montoya. Gabriele Mini, Italian driver who's a junior of Alpine, and it doesn't have a third driver listed, so that's interesting. Van Amsfort Racing has Caio Collet, Rafael Villagomez, who sucks, and Tommy Smith, very plain Jane name. He's from Australia. And Caio Collet's somebody who has experience, a Brazilian driver, so another one that I would consider somebody as an initial championship contender there. Oliver Gray, Hunter Yaney, another American, Ito Cohen. They're the drivers for Rodin Carlin Racing. So the second American driver there. Sebastian Montoya, Sebastian Montoya is got Colombian. He represents Colombia, but he was born in the U.S. Red Bull development driver too, so interesting there. Josep Maria Marti, Christian Mansell, and Hugh Barter. He's a weird looking guy. That's Campos Racing. Then in Genzer Motorsports, sees Nikita Bedrin, Taylor Barnard, and Alejandro Garcia. I don't know who any of those fucking people are. I probably will know some of them soon enough. PHM Charus, Sofia Florsch, Roberto Faria, and Piotr Wisnicki, Polish driver, Brazilian, of course. Florsch is German, so the one woman driver on the grid. She hasn't really done a whole hell of a lot in her single-seater career, kind of connected with DTM, has a social media presence on Instagram. We'll see what she's able to do, but I doubt there'll be a whole hell of a lot. The Indy NXT, so that's the last thing we do before we get into the what do you call, the preview for Las Vegas. Indy NXT, they'll be running this weekend, of course, at St. Petersburg. Ahmed completes Cape Motorsports lineup. So, yeah, Jacob Abel will drive for his family team, along with, I'm trying to look for here, Colin Kaminsky, an American driver. And then, let's see who else. Yeah, no. So that's for the Abel Motorsports team. Then Cape Motorsports, Enam Ahmed, who's a Middle Eastern guy, will join, what's it called? The Jagger Jones, the son of P.J. Jones, the grandson of Parnelli Jones, at the Cape Motorsports team. HMD Motorsports, well, I'll wait on that one. Andretti Autosport does have a bunch of cars out there. Jamie Chadwick will be driving the DHL car this year, moving from W Series and other formulas, a Williams Jr. driver. Lewis Foster and what's it called? Hunter McElrea, the Australian, James Rowe, the Irishman. So that's a 4-car team there. Junkos Hollander has Reese Gold, an American, and Matteo Nannini, Italian driver, amongst their effort. And then HMD Motorsports, who has 9 cars in this championship. Christian Bogle. You have Ernie Francis Jr. in his second year in Indy Lights. Danielle Frost. Josh Green. Rasmus Lind. Josh Pearson. Christian Rasmussen. Nolan Siegel. That is a face. So is Rasmussen's and Kiffin Simpson. So those are the drivers there. We'll see who comes out on top to start this season. And HMD has the numbers. If they don't win the championship, it would be pretty embarrassing. But we'll see what Jamie Chadwick can do, or Ernie Francis Jr., some of those drivers that stood out last year, because a couple of those guys moved up to the IndyCar series this year. I mean, Linus Lundqvist, who is the defending champion of the series, has nothing to show for it, which is pretty brutal. But hopefully that can be fixed eventually. We'll go and move towards the triple header at Las Vegas. I mean, Kyle Busch goes and wins at California, so it kind of takes away somebody that I would think that I would have chosen like straight away. But I mean, personally, I think he is a definite favorite for Las Vegas this coming weekend. I'm trying to bring up recent history at Vegas, best finishers and whatever, last 10 races at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. The best average finish is a tie between Martin Truex Jr. and Kyle Busch, 6.5. Truex has one win in the last 10 there. Joey Logano has won 3 of the last 10 races there, and of course won the race to lock himself into the final 4, which led to his second championship. Brad Keselowski, former winner there. Kyle Larson, a couple of years ago. Gagson actually finished 11th, driving the 48 car last year, in his first start at Vegas as a Cup driver, the Vegas native. Kevin Harvick, Ryan Blaney, Alex Bowman, a former winner there. Harvick's a former winner there in the last 10 races, and Denny Hamlin, too. So those are just a few guys there. I mean, this season's been weird start so far, Josh, but what do you look for here at Las Vegas? Who do you have as your picks for winner and a wild card?
Yeah, I think this season, I mean, yeah, like you said, it's been kind of a weird start to the year, but you know what? I'm gonna go with Kyle Larson, and it's a interesting pick, and it's because, well, he's been pretty quick, really, to start the year. I mean, yeah, Daytona was one thing. I mean, they were up there for a bit, but uh, California, I mean, kind of going back to the top of the show, they had really good pace, but they never were able to display that pace because they had the engine problems, and they were 16 laps down, and um, you know, had fast lap times throughout that race. I mean, they had 22 of the fastest laps during that race and was in traffic 16 laps down. And Larson was pretty quick in that final stretch, even though he was many laps down. So I think he carries over that speed from California over to Las Vegas. So he has been really fast to start the year. So I'm gonna pick him to take the win in Las Vegas. So we'll see if it plays out. But wild card wise, uh, yeah, I'm gonna go uh entry list here. Wild,
Well, I'm looking at
yeah,
the points in terms of anybody from 19th on because
yeah,
there's really only 36 cars. And
yeah. That's
interestingly
true.
enough, Kyle Larson is outside of the top 18 in
Yeah,
points currently. So
but I
that's a
don't think that should count though as a
yeah,
wild card. I think it should be because I think maybe a stipulation to that is top 20 in points or below top 20 in points, but they were also below top 20 in points the previous year or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Because I feel like early on there's a lot of anomalies back here, right? Because you have Chase Elliott is technically in 29th in points right now. Or wait, well,
no,
freaking
he's
Racing
four.
Reference has not updated it. Oh my god.
Yeah, no, they're four. He's 14th in points behind Corey LaJoy. Um, the
Yeah.
likes of Keebler Gibbs is up there in the top 18 right now.
Okay. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Look.
Cody Ware is 22nd in
Yeah.
points ahead of Dylan and Larson and others. So
Right. And everything. I mean, so yeah, it is a bit of a tough go at it here, but
yeah,
yeah. I mean, you know what? I'll go with Harrison Burton. Why not? Harrison Burton is a wild card this weekend. If we're going by that, I think he can be a pretty good wild card pick. Someone finished top 15, I think, in top 10 potentially. But yeah, should be an interesting one this weekend. Las Vegas, still pretty early, and I think Gen 7 race pretty well. Fontana, I think it really favors the mile and a half. So if they race like they've been racing on the mile and a half, it should be a pretty entertaining race.
yeah, I'd say so on that. I mean, uh, there's a lot of opportunity to move around on that track. So, and it was a track, and this package, this car did its best work on cookie cutter tracks, 1.5 mile racetracks. There is hope for that. I'm gonna pick Kyle Busch. I was planning on picking Kyle Busch this week, and gonna follow through on that. I think it's pretty self-explanatory after last week. Um, they did good work on 1.5 mile racetracks anyway. They're especially good on rougher 1.5 mile racetracks. So there is that. My wild card pick for this week will be Ryan Preece because his results in a lot of ways do not show how good he really has been. Daytona's kind of meh, but they were all up there. All the Stewart Haas cars were up there at some point during the race. He had a decent car uh, at California, and and got involved in that multi-car wreck. They seem to be running on the right. They seem to be on the right wavelength. So it's a good opportunity race for him to go out there, get some good points, and kind of start establishing his season. Second part of the West Coast swing, going to Phoenix the following week, which I think is a racetrack that would definitely suit him, especially in a Stewart Haas car relative to what he's driven before. The current, so now we go to the Xfinity Series 40 for 38, 40 cars for 38 spots. Kyle Busch will be making his first Xfinity start in a couple of years, driving the Colleague number 10. You'll have Joe Graff again in the 19. Tyler Reddick will make another start in the 24 for Sam Hunt. Nothing else. The Kyle season 38. Okay, so 20. I don't have that. Raja Caruth will be running another race for Alpha Prime. CJ McLaughlin, unfortunately, will be out there in the 53. Mason Maggio will be in the 66 for Carl Long's Motorsports Business Management. Ryan Vargas is DNQ'd the first 2 races of the year, looking to get in this week. Garrett Smithley DNQ'd at Daytona. I'm trying to see. I don't know who's in the 91. It kind of has a feeling like they're going to go and put Ross Chastain in it again, but to be determined. And Alex Labay is in the 28 for RSS. Again. Yeah, a couple of Cup drivers in there. Otherwise, the usual suspects this week. Josh, you have the floor first because I made the picks for Cup first.
Yeah, I think this weekend, I'll go Kyle Busch. First race back in the Xfinity series and since 2021. And I think he goes out and wins first race racing for Colleague Racing, and he goes out and gets this one, wins at the hometown first time, so he gets win, I think, number 203 in the Xfinity series. So this weekend, so that's who I pick. Wild card. I'm gonna go with Kaz Grala and the 26. I thought they did pretty well at Fontana, and I think with Fontana is a pretty rough racetrack, obviously, and you've seen evidence of that. But Las Vegas is a kind of a wild, or not wild card, but definitely kind of a rough track too. Since they last repaved it, so maybe that favors some of the more budget teams in terms of tire management and being able to stay up towards some of the big dogs in this series. So I'll go with Kaz Grala in 26, and they're adjacent to. I feel like their performance is somewhat adjacent to Joe Gibbs, as they are also Toyota.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I did pick Reddick last week, and I went to hell, but that's a Sam Hunt car as well. I'm gonna go and pick Cold Custard. He had a car to win last week. I think the momentum is there. He wants to close the deal this week, and he will to establish a third solid contender. I mean, right now he's 6th in points, even with the the wreck that he was involved in. The 2 Stewart Haas cars are 5th and 6th in points. Um, so that I'm picking Cole Custer to win the race, and then my wild card is gonna be. I mean, I can go there, and might as well. He's been consistent enough. I don't know how long this is gonna last, so I'm gonna go for it when I have the chance. My wild card choice for this week will be uh, Sheldon Creed because he's good at 1.5 mile racetracks. I mean, he was pushing really hard later in the season. There at the end of last season, he started kind of picking up on things and getting better. One of these days, he's going to get breakthrough. Why not at Las Vegas at a pseudo home racetrack for him? I think, and it's going to be one of the last times I'm going to be able to probably pick that. So, Creed, wild card, Xfinity. All right, Truck Series is back after a couple weeks off. They'll be racing their second race of the year. The 36 drivers for 36 spots, so no issues in terms of qualifying. Points, of course, are from Daytona, so they've only run one race, so nothing really crazy there. Entry list, Kaz Grala will be driving for Tricon Garage along with John Hunter Nemechek. Grala in the 1, John Hunter in the 17. The Grays will be running. Tanner Gray is going to be in the 15. Taylor, I think, is supposed to run the 17 after this race. And then Corey Heim, of course, in the 11. Ross Chastain will be in the 41 for Nice Motorsports. Brennan Poole will be in the G2G dumpster fire. And Kyle Busch will be driving his own 51 truck with Brian Patty at the helm. Well, since Josh picked Kyle Busch to win in his first Xfinity race back in a couple of years to be number 103, I'm going to pick Kyle Busch to win the truck race and win number 60, whatever the hell it is at this point. He's won like 8,000 races. So he's the all-time winner in 2 of the 3 major NASCAR categories. So I pick him to win this weekend. He won every race that he ran last year in a truck. So why not continue that trend? Kyle Busch will be my pick for that. The wild card selection. I have to go and look at this because, in theory, yeah, there's a Lawless Allen didn't make the show, or he got penalized. What the heck happened? Oh, Lawless Allen failed to qualify. Jeez, that sucks. Wild card pick. I mean, Mason Massey's on there twice. That's great. Double trouble. I think the wild card for me would be. I can't do that. I'm gonna go with Raja. I'm gonna go with Raja Caruth. Limited experience, of course, in a truck. It is wild. He did get in a wreck with his teammate Daniel Dye there late in the race at Daytona, but he does have ARC experience on the 1.5 mile racetracks. He proved pretty good at them last year to finish in the top 5, top 3 in points. So maybe I think he finished second. Definitely top 3. Nick Sanchez is doubled up too, so good job by NASCAR doubling up some of these drivers. So Caruth is my wild card. Kyle Busch is my winner. So, what say you, Josh, on the truck race?
Yeah, I truck race. I mean, you obviously, I was thinking about Kyle Busch as well in the truck race, but uh, I'm gonna go with uh Ben Rhodes. I feel like he had a good truck a couple years ago in this at this track, but couldn't quite get it done. So I'm gonna pick him. I think he's good in everything. I would have liked to pick Kyle Busch, but yeah, I don't think. I think it's gonna be a little bit tougher now. He's not in a Toyota anymore, and with all the power, I think there's gonna be a little bit of you know struggles a little bit in the truck series. It's not gonna be quite as easy as it's always been for him, even being with the winningest driver ever in the truck series. But wild card, uh, I'm gonna go with Haley Deegan, wild card. She did pretty good in her Xfinity debut last time they raced at Las Vegas back in September. She hasn't really done too well in her truck career, but I think Las Vegas probably fits well for her driving style, whatever that is. So we'll pick Haley Deegan to do something in as a wild card this weekend.
So, an all Thor Sport selection there for Josh. So, if you're a betting person, he's saying that the Thor Sport team is going to do well. And there is, I mean, I think the last race they were there, Thor Sport trucks were all really, really good. So, there is validity to that. I think Ekis driving for Thor Sport won there. Ty Majeski won. I think Ty Majeski won at Vegas last year in the second race. I might be wrong, but I feel like Ty Majeski won.
It was Chandler Smith winning last year at Las Vegas.
Okay, so there you go. So I'm already incorrect on that, but it's all right. what is it, Vegas? I thought they ran 2 races, so they only run one. All right,
Yeah.
yeah, Chandler Smith. I mixed it up with Bristol. All right, my fault. Because
Eh.
Ty Majeski won and Homestead. He won 2 out of the last 4 races there. So, all right, there's that. So, got through all the picks, got through the, I mean, like previews. I mean, we know what the track is. It's a rougher racetrack, older racetrack. I think the Xfinity race is going to be pretty interesting. A lot of a deeper field. Cup is a very deep field, 400 miles with like bright sun on the racetrack. They'll actually have to race a little bit. They'll have to drive it a little bit. Truck Series race will be under the lights with the downforce and all they have. They're going to have a lot of drafting going on. Let us know what's going on in the world of iRacing there, Josh, and other gaming and your sim segment.
Of course, yeah. It, this, I mean, past week, I did a lot of Auto Club. Of course, had to get my time in before the end of Auto Club. I actually have no idea if they're gonna change up Auto Club and or Fontana and change it up to the short track if they ever do, or if they're gonna have leave it as like a legacy track for people to play on because it's really fun on iRacing. Yeah, as it is in real life to drive this track, 2 mile oval, with the top. The top is really like where I like to run, but you can also generate massive runs on the bottom if you time it right and everything. And so for me, yeah, I ran Fontana a couple weeks ago with the ARCA car when they were racing on that schedule for that series, and was really able to drive it deep into the corner and get just tap the brake just a little bit and get right back into the gas and just get a lot of momentum off of turn 2 and turn 4, and then this past week applied kind of the same principle in the Xfinity car and the truck as well. So ran pretty well. I felt like for the most part. I mean, there's a couple of races where I got wrecked, but it was because just bounced off the wall too hard off of turn 4, trying to make the top work and sliding up into it. But just try to get in. Trying to make things happen, I guess, with the top. It's one of my favorite tracks, of course, and running up top like they did in real life is a lot of fun. And then managed to get in one of the cup events as well, and you know ran up into the top 5 for most of the race there, and I think finished in the top 10 in the cup race that I decided to try on iRacing with Fontana, and raced the top, and really a lot of the top 5 in that one did as well. So that was pretty fun, and honestly is just a lot of fun racing there. So hopefully iRacing keeps the old 2 mile layout in the game, and if they decide to, because I think they did design a short track for Fontana, that I think was maybe the initial design for the racetrack that they were going to build in real life. But definitely do hope that they keep the original layout for sure. And yeah, I think this week, iRacing for me, I think they have the 87 cars are at Road America, so that should be interesting. Which I've never raced that on Road America. So looking forward to seeing what that's like this week. The Cup, Truck, and Xfinity all at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. So maybe you might try that one out later in the week. We'll see. In terms of road racing, or well, we'll start off with yeah, road racing. GT3 at Ferrari GT3 at Fuji International Speedway. You have the Spec Racer at Oran Park, Mazda MX-5 at WeatherTech International Raceway, Indy Pro 2000s at Watkins Glen. Let's see, GT4 at Road America as well. Open wheel USF 2000s at Watkins Glen. yeah, trying to look through this, see if there's anything else to look at here. Uh, yeah, think trying to see what IndyCar is at. Oval Racetrack. You have Open Wheel C, so Kentucky. Yeah, IndyCar racing at Kentucky, so that should be interesting. I've raced there a couple times. It's not all that great, but you're in the throttle for most of it, but you can make it work. So maybe you might try that. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what I can do this week on iRacing. Kind of interested to try the 87 at Road America. Should be kind of like Watkins Glen in a way, but it's going to be interesting because I've never run it on that track, so I'll have to try it out. And some of the other tracks, but in terms of news this week, I mean, if you saw Dale Jr.'s Instagram earlier today, uh, they had the late models, the Cars late model tour. Posted a video of doing some testing at the virtual North Wilkesboro Speedway. So they've got the current Cars late model that they ran in that, or that they run in that series. I think it's replacing the Chevy Monte Carlo SS that's currently in the game as a late model, but it's going to be Cars Late Model Tour now officially on iRacing, and now I think it's officially um, a series in the game. So the iRacing Cars Late Model Stock Tour, and it's a partnership with iRacing, being the official racing game of the Cars Tour. Of course, based on Junior Motorsports Cars Late Model Stock Tour entry. Of course, Carson Quapple won Driver and Owners Championship with that team, 3,100 pounds, 400 horsepower. Of course, Dale Jr. owned iRace, or well, executive director and owner of Junior Motorsports and the Cars Store. Hands on the development, spending hours testing and giving feedback to help tune the car to match its real world counterpart. And of course, the game screenshots have Dale Jr. and his Sundrop car from back in September, which is pretty cool design there. So, yeah, this should be pretty exciting. With the efforts that the Cup drivers are putting into the Cars Tour. Of course, we talked about that earlier. Late model racing, trying to put a lot of effort into that. Seems like, so it should be interesting to see what tracks that they have on the game for the Cars Tour, of course. So might have to pick up this car and try it out. But yeah, it should be a lot of fun to ride around and race against other people on the short track. And talked about Dale Jr. racing him online a couple years ago in the 87 car. I'm sure he'll be trying out the Cars late model car there. So you might run into him there if I ever have the opportunity. So we'll see. But should be fun to try out. But yeah, I think that's it this week on sim segment. I don't think there's anything else to bring up, but it's mainly iRacing. Maybe someday the IndyCar console game will come out, and maybe we'll try it once it's on sale for $10 or something. But we'll find out eventually. But yeah, that's all I got for sim racing this week. And of course, you can follow sim racing, all my stuff at Twitch TV/usailor2, which follow my streams, and right side hop on and stream all my racing games and all that stuff. Go on there, follow Twitch TV/usailor2, and then of course to close out the show, that and my Twitter, JP Huffine, of course, where I'll have all my takes. And if I do decide to bet on one of these races, because apparently I've been pretty good over the years, I don't know if I'll do it or not, but if I do and I decide I have a good pick and I put it on there, I'll post the pick and the bet, I guess, and then we'll see. We'll live track, I guess, and see if I got it right or whatever for that week. Of course, bet responsibly, and of course, bet what you can afford to lose, and don't bet any money that you're emotionally tied to. Not financial advice or anything like that. So yeah, definitely should be interesting this weekend at Las Vegas, and at Bahrain and St. Pete. We'll see if I go to St. Pete. I haven't decided yet, but we'll see if I go. And of course, follow our YouTube page, Grip Strip Podcast. Go and subscribe to the page. View our content, view our videos from the past couple of months, weeks, whenever. See our latest stuff, which has been up there now this past week. So go on there and subscribe to our page, and like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, and follow our content on that we have, whether it's on the Spotify or Apple or whatever, wherever you consume your podcasts, and follow our page on Twitter as well. So yeah, I'll hand it over to you for the rest of the close, Phil.
Absolutely, man. Thanks as always for uh, great content and great support, as all for being the back end guy in terms of how the show goes, and also with all your insights. So I'm always thankful that you're here with me as my sidekick. You're able to go and balance things out here on the GSP. You can find me at Philip G. Matthew on Twitter. You can find us at Gripstrip Pod on Twitter. As Josh said, you can basically find us and find the Gripstrip Podcast anywhere you take in your podcast. The YouTube page, Gripstrip Podcast, of course. Go and watch us doing the show on the video stream. And then, yeah, we're going to be back for episode 159 next week, going over all three major series races. That's IndyCar, NASCAR, Formula One. Then we'll also get into Xfinity and trucks. The roundup will get into F2, F3, and some of the other in Indy NXT, what that took place this weekend. Coming weekend, probably might have some IMSA news since we're getting closer to the 12 hours of Sebring. We didn't really get into some of the news because they actually announced the entry list for the Le Mans 24 hours. Might get into that if we have a little bit of time. And whatever else is going on in the world of motorsports and sports, we'll bring it up here on the Grip Strip Podcast. We thank you for listening. Go and support, like, subscribe, uh, hit us up on our socials so that we can uh, keep improving, keep getting better. Maybe we'll start uh, putting merch out, since I'm a spirit animal, supposedly based on what Jared, who runs the Grid Talk deal, believes. So I might end up wearing that shirt on here, and we'll see about that. But for Josh, I'm Phil. Take care. We'll see you next week. Enjoy all the racing. Take Josh's advice, especially with the betting. Um, and though he is really good at what he's really good at it. So definitely, if you're going to take picks, definitely take his. But with that, we will see you next week. Take care. God bless and goodbye.